Okay, we are back. Sorry, we're a couple minutes late here, but we'll go ahead and return back to our regular session, and I will go ahead and ask the clerk to please take the roll. Oh, I'm sorry. Before you do that, before you do that, there's nothing to report out of closed session. My apologies. Now, Amy, if you don't mind, please take the roll.
Sure. Councilmember Dowden Calvillo.
Present.
Amara.
Present.
Mackey.
Here.
Oakley.
Here.
And Mayor Berlant.
I am here as well. Thank you very much. Okay, Pledge of Allegiance. If you could all join me for the pledge, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, we'll go ahead and move right into our agenda. And the first item here is under Mayor's acknowledgements and announcements. Just a quick report on our fire activity in the region. And so while we bring in Chief Spencer to join here, just want to give you all an update. Obviously, in my day job, I'm heavily involved in just a quick update. There are 28 major wildfires burning right now in California. Over 3.2 million acres have already burned this year, most of which have been in the past 30 days. And just to kind of put that into perspective, that is more land than the entire state of Connecticut. So we have definitely burned a lot. And many of these fires are some of the largest fires that California has experienced. In fact, 5 of the top 20 largest wildfires have occurred in 2020. And the number 1 has surpassed the number 2 by hundreds of thousands of acres, and that's the August complex. And so fortunately, Placer County's fires have remained relatively small. I'll let the chief kind of get into some of the local fires that we've had, but the closest fire to us really was up in Nevada County in August. There was a fire outside of Nevada City, and that was the Jones fire, and that has been contained. And then this past week, there was a about 1,300 acre fire in Yuba County, and that has now, as of tonight, been contained. So we've been relatively fortunate that while counties up and down the state are seeing extreme fire activity, we are not. We are just having all the impacts from the smoke. About in a little bit. So with that, I think we've got Chief Spencer. And so I did ask the chief to kind of go over a little bit of where we are with our own fire department as far as assisting with all of the fires, and then to discuss the red flag warning program that I had mentioned at the Meddlers group. Announced that last week that Auburn would be joining Placer County in the public education red flag warning awareness program. So Chief, I will turn my time over to you now.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Dave Spencer, your fire chief for the record. I appreciate the lead in. As you know, we are in unprecedented times right at the moment. As the mayor alluded to, we have covered 3 million plus acres of fire activity throughout the state. We are in early part of the season and continue to expect a change in weather events as we continue forward. We are nowhere close to being done with fire season, and I think that's extremely important to illustrate and underline both with the fire activity and with the potential. As you know, 5 of the top 20 all-time fires have occurred this year, and our folks, Auburn City, was able to assist. We're currently assisting with the North Complex. What I do want to tell you is that what is significant for us, since you have approved the second station being staffed, because of those additional personnel, we were able to not only send a strike team to assist with the North Complex, but as the additional requests came in for a second strike team, the rest of our surrounding areas, there were agencies that weren't able to provide the resource. And so it's better than 17 or 18 days ago, we sent a second engine with that additional request to the North Complex. They returned day before yesterday after their 15, 16-day assignment. We brought them back home. Another agency was able to step up and assist us. So I think that's significant because these are destructive, damaging, and deadly fires. And the only way that we're able to make any progress is to be able to put boots on the ground and train firefighters to be able to make headway on these large, complex fires. I'll put it into perspective. On almost all of the fires that are here within the surrounding area from Tulare County north, there's approximately somewhere between 1,000, 1,500 firefighters on each of them. That seems like a lot, but the actual request or the need is closer to 4,000 firefighters in order to get in front of these significant issues, significant incidents. And what happens when you're less staffed is it gives the opportunity for the weather pattern to change and the fire growth to continue in these explosive efforts. And so that's why we're trying to throw all our resources at these significant fires. And so we'll continue to pay attention to what's happening in the region. I'm grateful to you as a body for allowing us to be able to not only protect our city, but also to add to the region. What I will tell you in addition to that is because of the additional staffing you've approved, not only were we able to send out an additional resource, but we were able to cover our own city by standing up additional firefighters during our red flag events. And so that's a significant change that hadn't been happening in past. And so as Mayor Berlant talked about, the red flag program is really truly an educational process. It's been in my strategic plan from 2019. The county was able to initiate through their resources the actual flag display part of the program. I want to be clear that that's just the first phase. We are participating in it as a county-wide agency so that there's no confusion for the community about what's happening when we get into these critical weather events. It's an education piece. I will be coming to you at a later time talking about increasing our codes and enforcement issues. An example would be that when we have approximately 12 to 15 red flag days that occur over the course of a 12-month period, during those times, we have some critical areas for access and egress, and we need to change our parking ordinance so that we can have access not only into those areas, but also for our folks to get out, our residents to get out. And so I want to be clear that I'm coming to you at a later time to be able to strengthen our ordinances and our codes so that we can be successful, because I'll tell you, quite frankly, we're lucky that we did not have a significant incident here in our area. And so with that, I'll also say that as we move forward with our education components with the red flag, it will be a robust program that will also include volunteers that will patrol the areas. And the purpose of that is to be able to engage our community and explain to them, hey, this is a significant day. You need to pay attention to the media. You need to pay attention to the messaging, and you need to be ready to go. When we tell you that you need to leave the area, it is critical that you pay attention to us. We have had some close calls here recently. Chief Canan and myself have been using our Everbridge system. It has had some challenges. However, we're improving as we go with each event. And so we're going to continue to use it not only for evacuation dissemination information, but also to give our community that information that we are going into critical weather events. And it's just one more tool that we have available to us on top of our social media programs or on top of our large-scale news media to be able to get that information to our community. So we're going to use every asset that we have to be able to make sure that our community is informed and aware. And so I just want to again encourage everybody to sign up for Placer Alert. That is our primary source of information. And then from there, we will message out where to go for additional information. And so I'm grateful for all that you have done as a support, as an elected body. Thank you for that. I'm grateful for our community that has been very engaged in this process. And we're nowhere near where we need to be. We have a lot of work to do, but we're going to continue that effort on a go forward into perpetuity. This doesn't go away anytime soon. And so it's taken us decades to get here. It's going to take us a long time to get to a place where we can take a deep breath. So for that, I thank you. And I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Great. Thank you, Chief. Any questions? Yeah, sure. Councilwoman Mackey, go ahead.
You're muted.
Sorry about that. That's in case my dog barks. I keep it on you. Chief Spencer, thank you for all your hard work, and thank you to all the firefighters. I'm so proud of all of our firefighters. They are really dedicated, and I'm proud to live in a city where our firefighters really care about us and the state at large. I wonder about the Fork Fire. We haven't heard a lot about it. What's happening with it?
Yeah, great question. So the Fork Fire is in the National Forest, and so it had some explosive growth because of the wind event that was occurring. And that was what was responsible for that day that really it looked like doom and gloom over the city of Omaha. Since then, the fire growth has significantly declined. It's run by the Forest Service, so they have a little bit different management style of fires within the forest. I won't say one way or another on that, but what I will tell you is that there's been heavy resources in aircraft and aerial assaults to slow the spread of that fire. I'm hopeful that we can continue to stay out of any current weather events that would really test it, because that is a significant incident and we don't want to see that thing grow any further. And so again, I will lean on our federal partners and say that just like us as a small city and a local government, we take responsibility, and I expect our federal partners to do the same. And so for that, I'll tell you that at this point, I don't see any significant growth on that fire, but we're certainly keeping a close eye on it. So thanks.
Well, it's so close to the Middle Fork project, and that's what my concern was, and our water supply and so on. So that's why it's very little information coming out of the Forest Service about that. I always ask Daniel, but
I know, I just pulled it up too. It's sitting on 1,700 acres and they only have it 7% contained. So
yeah,
while the chief might be nice
grown.
about it, I think that the Forest Service is dinking around with it. And that my concern would be, and it was even on the first day, that if the Forest Service doesn't put enough resources on it, that it's fine that in the last couple of days in this past week, it hasn't done much, but what happens when the winds pick up and we get another wind event? And so it then pushes it closer to us, and that drainage could easily bring it towards Auburn. And so I know the chief was doing a nice job of kind of staying nice to our partners, but I think that, you know, a call from our chief to their office might be nice, just to express our concerns of whether or not they're aggressively fighting that fire or not.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Chief.
Certainly.
Looks like Councilwoman Amara has a question. Go ahead.
Chief Spencer, thank you. I appreciate everything you're doing and all our firefighters. And this year we're using our firefighters a lot, and that's good. I'm glad they're staying safe. But I wanted to ask you, I don't know if you have this data, maybe Daniel does. Do we know or have any idea of the causes, the primary causes of these fires? I know, you know, PG&E was to blame for a lot of them over the past years. I haven't heard that they are this time. So is there any data in that regard? Because, you know, obviously we're sending our firefighters out. It affects us. And if it is arson, maybe we need to do other things. So I just would be interested in some of that data, or just your opinion anyway.
Well, so great question. What I will tell you is that for data purposes, almost 95+% of every wildfire is human cause. Now, that, to be clarified, is not necessarily to say that it's arson, meaning that it's intentionally set with criminal intent.
Right.
There are many fires that are set accidentally. The example that I would use is as you saw on the news, the gender reveal that used a little bit of pyrotechnic with it. And then of course, the creek fire exploded as a result. And so what's important is to recognize that the Perry Ranch fire, for example, that we had that bumped into our city and was a significant fire growth. The investigation, when they determine what the cause is, they go after cost recovery. And so it's really important for people to understand that when we tell you, you need to be careful about what you're doing during these critical weather times, that if you cause a fire, it is very likely that you will be held accountable for the cost of the entire suppression cost of the fire. And so to your point, 95% are human caused. Now that percentage as to what's arson and what's not, that I couldn't tell you off the top of my head. What I can tell you is that many of the current fires are still listed under investigation, and our folks are doing a great job at trying to determine what the actual cause is, and they'll get to the bottom of it, and then we'll take the appropriate action from there. So it's important for everybody to understand that this is serious business, and when lives are lost and significant communities are lost as a result, we can't tolerate people that aren't behaving properly or taking this information seriously.
And on that regard, though, this year we've had an extraordinary amount of lightning, something I have never seen.
Correct.
Is that been a cause for this particular year, or is it still just from even cars on the side of the road? I know everything's hot, and our summers are certainly going into much later. So
yeah.
your
So
take?
with regard to lightning, that's associated with our monsoon flow. As you know, we live in an environment that is that Mediterranean type environment, and it allows for that seasonal Mediterranean type flow that brings lightning. And so when we get that information, we try to push that information out to our community. And there were many, many strikes that made it to the ground this season. And several fires had started as a result of that. Unfortunately, that's not something that we can control. It is part of the environment that we're in right at the moment. We can talk about global warming. We can talk about climate change. You can call it whatever you want. At the end of the day, it is important for all of us to recognize that we're in a different time and in a different environment, and we need to be cautious about what we're doing. And so I hope that answers your question.
It does. Thank you very much.
I'll just add 14,000 lightning strikes this year. The last time we had a storm like this was in 2008, about the same. And then the storm before that was 1987. So every decade to 2 decades, that occurred. So thank you, Councilwoman Amara. Any other questions from the council? Yeah, Councilwoman down in Calvillo.
Yes, thank you very much. And thank you, Chief. I'm glad to hear that we had at least one team return home safely. I'm very proud of their efforts. They're working very hard. Those are long assignments away from home in very dangerous conditions. I also appreciate that they serve as somewhat of a training ground for our firefighters as well, getting that experience should something horrifically awful happen here. They at least would have had some experience. Just wanted to confirm that we're providing sufficient coverage when our teams are away. And I heard you say that when we have the red flag warnings and so forth, we're ensuring that we are able to keep our fire stations staffed properly and to keep the public protected.
Yeah, so, and I totally appreciate the question. In 2019, I brought this plan forward to this body, indicating that we needed additional staffing in an opportunity to try to offset the general fund. We were to recover some of that funding through our out-of-county resource response. Every time that we commit to that, it's my job to make sure that we have enough resources here to protect this community. And I take that seriously. you will see, as long as I am the fire chief, when we run into high fire weather events, that I am going to staff up additional personnel, because the goal is to keep the fire small. And if something happens within the city limits or just adjacent to us, quite frankly, we can't wait for our county partners that are coming from significant travel distances. And so we need to be able to have those resources readily available. And so that's my commitment to you, to this body, and to our community. But at the same time, I also have to balance that with being able to send our resources to these catastrophic fires. We're at the point, as I indicated, where we're drawing off a request for 3,000 additional pieces of apparatus and crews from other states, and we're not even able to fill that request. And so it takes all of us together to be able to keep these fires in check. And so again, my first responsibility is here at home. My second priority is to make sure that we're adding value to our partners, because they're going to come and do the same for us. And so certainly I appreciate the question.
Thank you. And I know that my colleagues know this, because we went through the budget process, and we know that being able to staff that second house is very important to all of us. And we want to be able to continue to do that. There is a funding issue, of course. You know, if this is important for the voters, there is a ballot measure out there that will help us ensure that we can continue this type of coverage, because really we as a community deserve it. And so just putting that out there for the purposes of the record, that we have an opportunity to make this a lot more sustainable. So thank you, and continue.
Thank you for the clarification. Obviously, it's now the residents' decision whether or not we maintain this staffing level. So thank you for that. Any other questions? Yeah, Councilmember Sweppley, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Chief Spencer, the red flag warning program, just a quick question. Are all the cities in Placer County participating in the program? Do you happen to know that?
I couldn't answer that in an affirmative. What I can tell you is the county has made it available to all the districts and all the cities. And so I have a hard time believing that they won't participate in it. I think that's the whole point of having a county-wide program, is that it's consistent across all boundaries, so that we're not doing something different than another city or the county. And so I hope that all of the agencies are participating. All the emails that I've seen have been in favor of participating in the program. And so what I will clarify is that all that the county is offering is the education piece, and the actual red flags. We're going to take it a step further and expand that program out so it has a much more robust education component to that. And that is not part of the county program.
Thank you, Chief. Appreciate it.
Great. Well, thank you, Chief, for taking the time to brief us. I know we have a future discussion related to chipping and how we deal with that in the city. Unfortunately, we couldn't get that on this agenda, but appreciate the update. And I just want to end this item with one item. After the Perry Ranch fire that night, I stopped by our fire station just as our fire engine crew was getting back, and I was able to talk to Captain Williamson, who was the first engine at scene there from Auburn, and he's the one who saved the home. If you haven't seen any pictures, 2 homes, one in the city and one in the county, since the fire was right on the edge, almost were destroyed. But to look at how proud our firefighters were, even though they were covered in ash and hot, tired, and hungry, they knew that they had done well. And so I took an opportunity to thank them on behalf of all of us that night. They are definitely our heroes. So Chief, thank you for joining us this evening. Please pass that along.
Thank you for your
with that, I will go ahead and move on into our agenda. And so the first item on our next item here is agenda approval. This is the time set aside for council members and or the public to ask for removal, postponement, or a change to the listed sequence of an agenda item. The agenda will be approved by a roll call of the council. Is there anybody from the council that would like an item removed? I will ask the city clerk, is there anybody from the public who has asked for an item to be removed?
There's not.
Okay, with that, if I can get a motion for approval?
I move-
Approval.
Second,
Okay, if the clerk will please take the roll.
Councilmember Dowden Calvillo,
aye.
Amara,
Yes.
Mackey,
Aye.
Spokely,
Yes.
and Mayor Berlant.
And I am an aye as well. Okay, moving on to the consent calendar. All items listed on the consent calendar are considered to be routine in nature and will be approved by one blanket motion with a roll call vote. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless persons request specific items to be removed from the consent calendar for discussion and for separate action. Any items removed will be considered after the motion to approve the consent calendar. And I am going to remove items 3 and 5. Is there anybody else from the council that would like any other items removed? Okay, not seeing any. I will ask the city clerk, is there any items requested by the public for removal?
No.
Okay, with that, I would entertain a motion.
I
Mr.
move
Mayor,
we approve the consent agenda minus items 3 and 5.
Second.
second.
Coming back to Councilmember Spokely, did you have a comment before we take a vote there?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was just going to make a motion.
Okay, perfect. I will ask the city clerk to please take the roll on items 1, 2, and 4.
Councilmember Dowden Calvillo,
Aye.
Amara,
Yes.
Mackey,
Aye.
Spokely,
Yes.
and Mayor Berlant.
And I'm an aye. Thank you. Moving on to item number 3, this is the Endurance Capital Committee. The requested changes to establishing the resolution. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Councilwoman Dowden Calvillo, who is our liaison to that committee. Councilwoman Dowden Calvillo.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. I did request that this item be pulled off just because there were some clarifying amendments that were necessary to the enabling resolution. As a liaison, I did work very closely with the Endurance Capital Committee, but doing this via Zoom has its difficulties. And so there were a couple of changes that the committee discussed that did not get incorporated into the version that is before you today. And so I believe, Amy, you have a copy of those suggested changes. Is that correct?
Yes.
You can share. I think she's going to share them. They really are just clarifying and,
Wrong one.
grammatical, really, some of them. And let's see, she's going to share that with you. And again, I did talk to Chairman about these suggested edits, and he's absolutely 100% fine with them. And okay, so if we can just go up to the actual resolution. There we go. Okay, so the changes that I'm suggesting are in purple font. And truly, it's just, we've got a couple of spelling errors in the enabling resolution. Committee needs to be changed to committee. And so you can continue to scroll down, please, Amy. There's a couple of locations where it was spelled incorrectly. If you stop there, please, or go up to just a little bit, please, to the, there you go, a little bit there, perfect. And then there was one instance where it was actually referred to as a commission. So I changed it to committee as well. The changes that are in red font are the changes that you already saw in your packet. So the commission was just looking to increase its number, or at least its opportunity to have additional members, because there are so many people that want to volunteer. So that language was proposed by the committee. I didn't propose any clarifying changes. You'll please scroll down, Amy. The next change was just, actually, you can see that these two paragraphs here were dealing with the same issue. And what the committee wanted to do was to ensure that the chairman could serve more than one term, that he didn't have to rotate every year. They certainly respect that the chair needs to be elected. So we wanted to clarify that. And then they also wanted to ensure that the other officers had the opportunity for election on an annual basis too. So I just clarified that language. And again, we went back and forth, and I was trying to convey this to the committee over Zoom, and it was difficult. So these are clarifying, again, just clarifying language here, doesn't change the intent at all. And then again, if you'll scroll down a little bit more, please. These changes here are also just clarifying, because there are two different opportunities for a vacancy to occur. One is when the term expires, and the other is an unscheduled vacancy. That's the existing language. And so essentially they wanted to ensure that the city clerk would post the public request for applications for those vacancies, and that the committee would then review those applications, select the best candidate for recommendation to the council for appointment versus approval, because it is an appointment. So again, just very minor cleanup changes, and that's it. So if there are any questions, again, the chairman is 100% fine with these changes. And if there aren't any questions or any public comment, then Mr. Mayor, I'll be ready to move adoption of those.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for that. Any questions from the council for Councilwoman Donna Calvillo on those edits and changes? Okay, they seem minor enough. I'll ask the city clerk, any comment from the public?
No, there's not.
Okay, great. Then I'll bring it back to Councilwoman Donna Calvillo for a motion.
Yes, thank you very much. So I'll move by resolution that we approve the requested changes by the Endurance Capital Committee and myself to the resolution establishing rules and procedures for the committee.
I'll second that.
Okay, with that, if there's no other discussion, I'll go ahead and ask the clerk to take the roll, please.
Councilmember Donna Calvillo,
Aye.
Lamara,
Yes.
Mackey,
Aye.
Stokely,
Yes.
Mayor Berlant.
And I'm an aye. Okay, the requested changes to the establishing resolution of the Endurance Capital Committee passes unanimously. Okay, moving on to item number 5. This is the extension of the COVID-19 Emergency Restaurant Support Program. I felt that this was important enough that we just briefly take it off and allow the city manager to briefly give an overview and remind all of us what this program is and what this change or indefinite continuation of it means. So John, I'll turn it to you.
Yeah, Mayor and Council, really quick on this. Essentially, this is the extension of the allowance for encroachment of businesses out into the public right of way, and it allows the city to work with not only individual businesses, but the various associations to create opportunity and some flexibility to deal with the kind of the ever-evolving restrictions of both the state and the county regarding the whole COVID-19 pandemic. Tonight, probably the biggest item or element of what the council is doing tonight by kicking this out a couple of months is it allows much of what has been done, especially with the restaurants, to continue into November. The one thing I will try and stress with everybody is that we're currently working with the various business associations with how this is going to really go beyond. Tonight, you're kicking it into November, but really what is going to come from all this is an expanded program for moving forward, for not necessarily what I would call permanency, but I would definitely describe it as a prolonged period. Everything from how we look at our streets, how we look at our parking, how we allow businesses to encroach and kind of take back the streets a little bit. So tonight, the biggest item obviously has to do with the restaurants. As a city, and as far as our work on this, we've been working with the business associations, the chamber, to try and advance some things. There's the Placer Shares program that we've been advocating. Every other week right now, the council has their economic recovery workshops that are going, constant communication, but most importantly, our ability to collaborate from the staff level with the businesses to allow some of these things to go. So tonight, this item really is just kicking this out, but I will assure the council that something will return in the medium future for how we will be moving beyond COVID, and probably a restructuring for how we will do business on this level with folks. So I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Great, thank you very much, John. Any questions from the council on this item? Okay, I'll ask the city clerk, are there any public comments on this item?
There is not.
Okay, then before I ask for a motion, I just want to thank our city manager for bringing this forward. I think this is just one of the many elements that this council and the city has done to support our businesses. I mentioned this the other day at Medler's, but I just think that it's important that it be made crystal clear that the council is doing anything and everything we can to support our businesses. We are constantly individually, talking to business owners, walking around town, and then as a group meeting with our business leaders. And this, one of those items, obviously, last week, businesses were able to, restaurants, I should say, were able to reopen at 25%. That still is nothing compared to what they need to turn even a profit and be back to where they were. And so I think this gives additional capacity. And even though it's very difficult, and I don't want to downplay the need, but eating out in the smoke like it is right now is incredibly unhealthy. Yet this is the only way some of these restaurants can survive. And this is only one of those many items, including us setting up a decor in the street, along in the parking spaces, passing out PPE, advocating to the state, advocating with the county. And I think we are continuing to do everything we can to get our communities slow down the spread of the virus, but more importantly, do everything that we can to get our businesses safely reopened as quickly as possible. I think, as you all know, I know the council does, but just for the general public, well, we sent a letter back to the state demanding that indoor operations open immediately, and that was at the end of last month, and we did not hear anything back from the state, so we are still waiting for a response. And as I mentioned at our COVID or our economic workshop on Friday, the state has again made changes to the formulas that they use for calculating the different tiered systems, and with an adjusted positivity rate based on the amount of testing capacity, the adjusted rate is actually a negative factor for Placer County and will make it more difficult for us to continue this downward trend that we have been on in reducing the spread of the virus, reducing our positive cases, and reducing the number of people that are in our hospital. So we will continue to stay on top of it. And then just one last thing on this item is just to be crystal clear that even though the county lifted their local emergency, the state's emergency still applies, which means that all of the state's restrictions on our businesses, all of the required guidelines on our business sectors, and the requirement for all of us to wear face coverings. It doesn't matter our personal view of the five of us, and it doesn't matter the county lifted their local emergency, the state's orders still apply regardless of anything that is done at the local level. So I just wanted to be clear because I have gotten a lot of comments back from people who are confused on what it means for us in Placer County, but at least I believe the five of us stand united in continuing to advocate for more reopenings and more consistent and reasonable guidelines from the state. So just wanted to say that here, though we talked about it at length at Friday's meeting, which anybody can go back and watch. So with that, I'll go ahead and open it up for the council for a motion on this.
Mr. Mayor, just really,
Go ahead.
really quick, I just wanted to say that, I appreciate that you provided this overview of all the actions that the council has been taking, because we all recognize the great significance that our small businesses have to our community. Their success is our success, and we are committed to doing everything that we can to help facilitate them in their opening. And I mean, it's incredibly crucial. And I wanted to go on the record with that particular message, that we recognize the importance of our businesses. We want to make sure that they can remain open and that they can flourish. It's very difficult, and we are taking every measure that we can to assist them. And I appreciate that we've really been thinking outside the box to do this. But it is incredibly important. We recognize that these are our members of our community, and we will continue to work as hard as we can to support them and to assist them through this, because we are Auburn strong. So thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Councilwoman Amara, go ahead.
Yeah, and I'd just like to add that the smoke will lift, and I support what our city manager said, that we will continue to do this even after COVID, because let's face it, when they have full capacity, they're able to have even more capacity, a lot more opportunity. And again, we all support our small businesses, and we're all doing whatever we can. And I appreciate that our council is so unified in terms of really helping the small businessmen and doing what we can. And thank you for the clarification I think that that does need to be clarified, and I think we all welcome people to come and approach us and ask us personally or by email for further clarification if there's any more confusion. But I think it's pretty clear that we all wholeheartedly support small businesses and are doing everything we possibly can. So I'd be happy to make a motion unless someone else, I don't want to steal anyone's
I just
thunder.
want to make sure, does anybody else have any comments they'd like to make? Okay, hearing none, go ahead and bring it to the council for a motion.
Yeah, I move that we pass the extension of the COVID-19 Emergency Restaurant Support Program.
I'll second.
Okay, if the clerk will please take the roll.
Councilmember Dowden Calvillo,
Aye.
Amara,
Yes.
Mackey,
Aye.
Buckley,
Yes.
Mayor Berlant.
And I am a absolute aye. Thank you very much, everybody on that item. Okay, that ends our consent calendar. So that brings us to public comment. This is the time provided so the public may speak to the council on an item that is not on the agenda. We ask that the public's comments be made as brief as possible. The council cannot act on any items not included on the agenda. However, the items will be automatically referred to staff because of COVID-19 and our current virtual meetings, as was posted when this meeting was advertised last week. We are and have been accepting public comment both via email at publiccomment@auburn.ca.gov, as well as by telephone at 530-823-4211, extension 112. And so I will go ahead and ask the city clerk if there's any public comment on this or public comment on an item not on the agenda.
I do have public comment.
And while you do that, I'm really sorry. I wanted to open up. Is there anyone on the council that has a public comment before? Yeah, Councilwoman Mackey, go ahead.
I just wanted to take this opportunity today to thank you, Mayor Berlant, and the City Council for the commendation for Bernie Schroeder for her 33 years of service. She was very honored and overwhelmed the other day, as were her friends and people that submitted comments. So thank you very much for doing that. It was much appreciated and enjoyed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilwoman Mackey. I would echo that. It was a nice opportunity to highlight that and appreciate that. Any other council members have any other items? Okay, we'll go ahead and now turn it to the city clerk.
Yes, Mike Holmes here. I have some comments for the city council meeting tonight. First of all, let me say I'm happy to see Bernie Schroeder was commended for all her work that she's done for the city over the years. It seems like it took a while to do that, to get that done, but well deserved. And I won't repeat all the accolades that occurred on Friday, but I thought, and this is just a personal opinion, that doing it at a city council meeting might be more appropriate, as probably more people would be tuned into that. So anyway, second item is a few months ago, the Endurance Capital Committee approved a resolution to get the city council to approve that a resolution that would begin an effort to have the Tevis and Western States runs officially recognized by the state of California as the official 100-mile endurance events. And for some reason, that has not been before you yet. I've not seen it on the agenda. And once you approve it, I already have a number of agencies and chambers and so forth that would come on board to support that. So I hope we can get that done over the next month or so, and then I can go to work getting all these other agencies to support it. I think it would be something that would be of significant economic value to the city of Auburn, and so I hope you will support that. Okay, thank you.
And that is all for public comment.
Okay, thank you very much, Amy. Appreciate that and appreciate the comments from everybody. Moving on to our public hearing, item number 7. This is the notice of violation appeal for 357 Nevada Street. So I will go ahead and open the public hearing and turn it over to John or Gary. Or city staff.
Why don't I go ahead and introduce it, and somebody can pick this up. Mayor and Council, tonight you are hearing an appeal regarding 357 Nevada Street. This is an unpermitted structure which has gone through our code enforcement process. Staff members that will be talking about this will be both John May and Jennifer Solomon, as well as Gary Bell, our city attorney. So I will turn it over to whomever is ready to lead off on this thing.
Jennifer, you are on mute. And you're sideways. I don't know if you are able to turn the phone around a little bit.
Her cameraman is working on it.
Okay, we definitely can see you the right size now, and it looks like you're unmuted.
Okay, can you hear me now?
We can hear you and we see you right side up. So go ahead, Jennifer. Thank you for being with us tonight.
Okay. Again, good evening, Mayor Berlant and City Council members. Jennifer Solomon, your Code Enforcement Officer. Tonight we are here before you regarding an appeal of a notice and order violation, order to abate, regarding an illegal commercial building. A 2,200 square foot detached building was constructed without a building permit or other city approval at 357 Nevada Street. The building is occupied by Predator Off-Road, owned by Mike Cunningham. The packet before you has many details regarding this case, but I'd like to provide you with a quick summary. This violation was brought to the city's attention in January of 2018 after receiving a complaint. Staff made contact with Mr. Cunningham and started working with him and his engineer for several months. In February of 2019, staff summarized the violations in a follow-up letter to Mr. Cunningham and established timeframes for compliance. However, deadlines were not met, and between the months of March and September of 2019, Mr. Cunningham was cited. Those citations have been paid and are not part of tonight's appeal. In September of 2019, Mr. Scheller of Scheller Engineering was introduced to the project by Mr. Cunningham and started working with staff to find a resolution. Mr. Scheller provided staff with colored site plan showing the various property lines in this commercial complex. At that point, staff could clearly see the unpermitted building was constructed over 3 different property lines. As such, in May of this year, staff issued the notice of violation order to abate. All the responsible parties were notified regarding the violations and the corrective action. A summary of the violations included the California Building Code, Electrical Code, Fire Code, and the Auburn Municipal Code. Furthermore, this expansion did not comply with the development standards, and it is not eligible for a variance or a retroactive use permit. Furthermore, demolition of the building is the path to correct the violation. As you know from previous hearings, the notice violation can be appealed, and Mr. Scheller, on behalf of Mr. Cunningham, filed the appeal in a timely manner. The appeal did not state that the violations did not exist. Rather, the appeal stated in the process of rectifying the violations and required additional time to complete. It has been approximately 2.5 years since the violations were brought to Mr. Cunningham's attention, and based on the evidence provided, staff recommends upholding the notice of violation. Staff would also like to mention that the property representative, Kelly Manos, has called John May, your building official, several times regarding this matter. Ms. Manos is the general partner and manager of the Kessler Rentals for these properties. After discussing the abatement process, Ms. Manos elected to obtain the demolition permit, but has not commenced the work pending the decision from council. It is our understanding that she is also planning on attending tonight's meeting. I thank you for this time, and I will turn this over now to John May.
Hi, how are you all tonight? You hear me all right?
John.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and Council. John May, your building official, and Jennifer gave us a good outline, but I would like to briefly kind of discuss the code compliance complexities of this case, as well as the efforts by city staff to find a solution for the appellant that meets all the building, fire, and municipal code requirements. So first and foremost, the most important thing is the unpermitted building in question clearly crosses 3 property lines. As you can see in your staff report, the site plan that was provided by the appellant. And it was also built without a permit. Currently, although it's very close to the existing building, the unpermitted building is detached from the existing structure. And I wanted to bring this up because some of the more complex building code issues in this case relate to whether the unpermitted building is attached or detached. For instance, if it's detached as it is, the unpermitted building is not required to have fire sprinklers, but it is required to have an accessible or ADA path of travel to the public way on Nevada Street. It would also be required to have a 2-hour firewall installed to separate the unpermitted building from the existing building. If it were attached, and these are all possibilities we've explored as staff, no accessible or ADA path of travel to the public way would be required. However, fire sprinklers would be required. In either case, whether attached or detached, there's a requirement of building code for 2-hour fire rated construction of the structural supports and the roof. And just to be clear, metal building is not a 2-hour construction. There would be additional work to do. These are significant challenges to trying to legalize this building. The staff has also explored the possibility of a use permit. The appellant has proposed several alternative locations for the structure, but none of the alternatives meet the location or meet the requirements in the municipal code for setbacks in the industrial zone. Lastly, any legalization of the unpermitted building would involve a lot merger to eliminate the 3 property lines in question. However, a lot merger can only create a legal lot, which meets all applicable standards. Currently, there are several buildings that are non-conforming on the existing properties, which would be combined. And these properties alone, or these buildings alone, would prevent such a lot merger from occurring. All of this discussion also assumes that the building itself can meet the structural requirements of the California Building Code. However, I've had several discussions with a structural engineer who has personally visited the building, and he has indicated that the structural aspects of the building appear to be inadequate. For these reasons and the reasons Jennifer mentioned, staff recommends that the notice of violation be upheld. Thank you, and I can answer any questions you may have.
Great, thank you very much, John. Let me ask the council, any questions for either Jennifer or John? Yeah, Councilwoman Donna Calvillo, go ahead. And then
Yes,
Councilwoman Mackey will come to you next.
Thank you. I have several questions with regards to this. First of all, and Jennifer, you may have said this, but I didn't catch it. When did we learn that the construction was occurring on 3 parcels?
That was midway through the process. So we first found the construction occurring in January of 2018 after receiving the complaint. We, in working with the applicant, he first provided a site plan, which is in your staff report, that was inadequate. It actually indicated that there was 23 feet between the rear property line and the building, to which and it didn't indicate any of the 3 interior property lines. We did a bit more research, located that there most likely was property lines there, and then requested a more complete site plan. So we didn't actually know they existed until we received the larger color site plan that you see from SOMAS Engineering, I believe, did it. And Glenn Scheller helped put that together, who's also an engineer. At that time, that obviously put the brakes on, or really hindered any type of legalization, because of the non-conforming buildings that were already on the lot and creating a conforming lot.
So, and can you just expand upon that just a little bit more with regards to the lot merger, that you can only approve a lot merger in this instance, that if it creates a legal parcel? So what you're saying then is that because there are other non-conforming buildings on the site, lot line adjustment could not be done legally?
That's my understanding. It's more than just that. You have to have conforming parking, conforming access. There may be an issue with fire department access. It gets squeezed down. All of these are existing conditions. We haven't gone into, because as soon as we saw essentially the buildings that are there do not meet the setback requirements for the industrial zone in the municipal code. So as soon as you see that, it becomes existing non-conforming. And our understanding is that a legal lot has to be created. Has to meet lot coverage, setbacks, all those items.
Okay. So, and I also just kind of wanted to discuss a little bit about the process. I mean, it seems like at the very beginning, city staff were trying to work with the applicant, because it appeared that perhaps we thought that we could address some of the issues, but it wasn't until you really got into the nuts and bolts that you realized that they couldn't. Is that correct? Because you were going down one path and they secured an engineer, and then there was some kind of a relationship issue or what have you, and they secured another. It just seemed like we were going down one path, and then all of a sudden, 2 years later, we issued a notice of violation order and abatement that basically stated they had to demolish the building. So it's just kind of can you discuss that a little bit further?
Certainly. Yes, at the time we discovered it, the direction was we need to try to work this out and figure out a path towards legalizing the structure. So in that effort, we did, and I had several discussions with the appellant, with Mike, telling him that, look, this work can be done and you may not get what you want. This building may never be able to be legalized, but we can go down the path. And if you want to go down the path, we need a site plan. If you want to take the next step, we need this. So we did, as we informed him repeatedly, I know I did personally, saying, you provide these things, but we still in the end may not be able to legalize the structure. And we explored attached versus detached, which is why I mentioned it. We explored use permits. We explored, it doesn't meet the requirements for a variance. And then you come to that lot merger, and that's a big killer. We didn't go down that path because, again, that's another amount of money for the appellant, the staff time of doing a full examination. As soon as we saw that the setbacks were non-compliant, we knew it wouldn't be a compliant lot. So there's probability and a possibility in those older lots that there's many other non-conforming situations, but we stopped right there. And that's when we started saying, okay, now it's demo time.
Okay. And okay, so let's see here. Let's see if I had any other questions for you. I know I have questions for the appellant when that time is appropriate, but
I'd like to point out really quickly, and it's something that's not mentioned in my staff report. There are potentially places for that building on that lot. They just don't serve the purpose desired for the appellant or the property owner. I just wanted to point that out. Those were identified, some of those areas, but they're just not, they don't serve a functional purpose for the owner or the appellant.
okay. All right, thank you.
Great,
That's
thank
it for
you.
right.
Thank you, Councilwoman Donacovill. Councilwoman Mackey.
Thank you, Mayor Berlant. I guess I'm a little confused. Who owns the other two parcels, John?
Oh, they're
The
all
Kesslers-
owned by
The
Kessler.
Kesslers obviously own one parcel. Do they own the other two as well?
Yes, they do. There's, I think, 4 on that site, 4 separate parcels, I believe, maybe 3 or 4.
I see. So when it was discovered that the building encroached on 3 parcels, then all bets were off.
Yeah, I mean, it's untenable.
Right, exactly. I understand. And you said that there was another location the building could be built, but it wouldn't work for the applicant.
Well, I mean, staff identified, I had some verbal discussions there. It's a big lot. There are potentially places to move the building, but if it doesn't serve the purpose of the applicant, and then you get into the ownership group would have to approve it. And I just, at that point, you're removing the building anyway and making an application. So I didn't include it in the staff report, but we went that far as to try to, let's see if we could maneuver this building somewhere on the lot.
Right.
But we never followed up on that discussion. It was just something we did trying to find a solution, and then it just didn't, it's not going to
So
work.
maybe I should ask this of the applicant, but when you purchase a building, one of those metal buildings, doesn't the person or the company that provides that metal building, don't they require proof of permitting and all that sort of thing before you construct that building on your property?
Yeah, I mean, typically that's what we see. Typically we see the building that sells it be involved in the construction of it.
Right.
I don't know if that was the case in this instance. I haven't been able to ascertain who the contractor was or even the building manufacturer, because typically there's several manufacturers that make that type of building.
Well, somewhere in here I saw something about the building manufacturer. Maybe that was in what we got today. I don't know.
Maybe, yeah. I don't think it's in our report.
Okay. All right. Thank you, John.
Any other questions from the council? So, John, I have a couple questions, and it's on the same line as Councilwoman Mackey. A building like this, and I'm a little unclear, because it's not necessarily a conventional constructed building at site. Does it require a contracted licensed contractor to install it?
Well, I know, no, California law allows owner builder, but I've never seen this type of building is called a moment frame. It's a, steel beam construction with basically a skin on it. Similar to the airport, hangars at the airport, they're the same type of structure. You could do an owner builder, and I don't know that I've ever seen an owner builder, but the law allows for it. but typically the manufacturer of the building is involved in some way in the construction. At the airport, that's been the case. There are special inspections required for this type of building with high strength bolting because it's all bolted together. And obviously none of that occurred that I know of. We don't have evidence of that. So I have never seen one constructed, I guess, as an owner builder, although the law would allow it.
In an owner builder situation, remind me how the building code reads. Is it the owner of the building or the owner of the property?
In this case, so as a leasee, unless they have in their contract written in that they have permission to pull permits, which some leases will state that, we would require the owner of the property to pull it as an owner builder, not the lease.
I guess I'm still not super clear in this case. And again, the appellant will have their opportunity, but in this case, from your perspective, and I realize you don't work for the contractor state licensing board, but was a contractor required to perform this work?
Not required, no. It could have been the owner builder and they could have put it up with wrenches in their toolbox. The state allows that.
Okay.
I've just never seen that. It'd be highly unusual for a building like this to be built by a layman.
So assuming though a contractor was hired to do the work, correct me if I'm wrong, but is it not as part of their license that they're required to ensure that all work is done in accordance with state law and municipal code, and thus permits would be needed to be gathered by them?
Absolutely.
Not necessarily the building owner?
Absolutely. It's ultimately a contractor. They take a test. They acknowledge the law. The law says you get a permit. Whether the owner wants one or not, it's their responsibility to get one. Ultimately, unfortunately, it falls on the property owner or the leasee in this case, because we don't have an ability to pursue a contractor that we don't know who it is.
Gotcha. Okay.
Mayor Berlant, just to follow up on that specific question, there are other elements of construction, though, that do require a licensed plumber or electrician or what have you. For example, the power panel and things of that nature, that must be done by a licensed contractor. So perhaps the actual raising of the building may not be required to be a contractor, state licensed contractor, but the other elements within that would require licensure.
Yeah, that's a good clarification. The electrical code requires a qualified person who is aware of safety protocol. And so essentially the electrical code eliminates the ability for some owner builder work.
Okay. And again, maybe this is a question the appellant will be able to shed some light on, and maybe if not, Gary as well. But I guess I'm a little confused in this case of who is truly responsible, whether it is at the end of the day, the business owner, the property owner, or any of the multitude of licensed contractors that would have had some level of work on this. So Gary, maybe you could shed some light on that question.
Yeah, so the term owner is defined specially in the California Building Code. And so that includes someone who actually owns the property. So what we would traditionally think of as an owner, but it also includes anyone who has possession of the property or occupies the property. So technically a building permit must be pulled by an owner before the work is done. That could be by a lessee or someone who occupies it. As John mentioned, it could be dictated by the lease on who's allowed to pull permits and who's not allowed. But as far as the building code goes, a person who occupies the property and leases it is a quote unquote owner who needs to get a permit under the building code.
Okay, thank you for that. Any other questions from the council for city staff? Yeah, Councilmember Spokley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess, John, this question is for you. The building that we're talking about is not the old existing building, which, as I think was pointed out in the staff report, maybe I missed that, but it's obviously non-conforming because it crosses over a property line. It's the two new spaces that were built off, I think, to the north of the existing structure. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's the northwest side, and we did not address the existing building. That's existing non-conforming It's only for the work we saw, and we have no reason to believe that any of that existing work was illegally constructed or anything. This is solely for the northwest, the new building on the northwest corner.
So based on California building code, if somebody adds on to an existing structure, isn't there a requirement that they go back and fix any existing non-conforming issues that pre-exist?
There may be, however, in this case, it's actually not attached. I know it looks from the overhead like it is. It's very close, but it's not attached to the existing building. It's actually detached.
Okay.
And that gets into that conversation we had about would it be better to attach or detach?
Okay. You mentioned that the construction began out here in 2018. I saw in the staff report that there was a lot of correspondence between folks, you, the city, Jennifer, and the folks building things out there. How, John, did we get to this point where, as I recall, in my 6 years on council, this is the first time I've seen this project. How did this continue on as long as it has? I mean, I'm extremely frustrated when business owners expand, modify, retrofit buildings when, and in some cases, and I'm not sure if that's the case here because I've heard, you know, owner builder, but in some cases hire contractors who go and build things on properties where if they're licensed in the state of California, they understand what the requirements are. Yet we get to situations like this where we've got a business owner who's expended lots of money and expanded this building to add these bays to it. And we're faced with a decision that might require them to demolish it. I mean, how do you know, was there meetings with staff? Did the applicant come in and say, here's what I'm planning on doing? Did they bring in sketches? And I've seen some of your sketches, John, that people bring into you and they're like cartoon drawings on paper. Did any of that occur to get to where we're at today?
Well, we definitely had, I mean, we went through the pre-development process, but this was after the building was built. This was not prior to. I guess I'll leave it to the appellant to discuss whether he came in or not some time ago and ask questions, but the building was built when we saw it. As a matter of fact, when I saw it, it was not quite complete. We issued a stop work order and he continued to complete the building. Basically, whether, you know, putting the roof on it or completing the roof and some other minor stuff. So the policy in the past has always been to work with them and try to legalize it so that we didn't have to demo it. The building was fully constructed when we originally saw it, or 95%. It was always a question of, do we have to demo or not? The efforts in the past were to prevent that from occurring. But once we got down the road, we realized we couldn't. And we were clear with the applicant or the appellant from the beginning that this may never happen for you. You may have to demo, but here would be the next step. And we find when the appellant stopped working with us, when things went cold, when it had been months where it was supposed to be 2 weeks, which is typical past practice, to try to move that process along, and he was responsive to that. So we did the best we could to try to prevent demo, and here we are. Eventually, it led us to this notice violation. So I see, at least on some of the documents, that there were licensed professionals involved with this. What, if any, recourse does the city have with these folks designing things and making recommendations, I think, to applicants that clearly are in violation of building code, plumbing code, fire code, whatever the codes are? Right. Well, I think those people, all the design professionals I'm aware of came on after the building was built. There was some questionable advice early on, which is unfortunate. The second team was very thorough, and that's where you get the professional site plan that we got, and which identified the actual property lines. But they were all hired after the fact, after the building was built. As far as I know, that they didn't have any involvement in the actual construction.
Got it. Thank you for that. My last question is, and I've gone through the staff report and it's voluminous. There's lots and lots of information, but I'll just ask the question to make sure I understand. I mean, if this applicant tried to process a boundary line adjustment to encapsulate this new structure, would that be enough? Or are there other fundamental concerns, issues, fire sprinklers, you know, all the things that we've kind of touched on, and I know you touched on your staff report, that seems like it's not enough given the recommendation to require the demolition of this structure. Is that correct?
That's correct. There's multiple issues. If it could be done, the lot merger, then you run into the accessibility, the ADA, the fire separation, the rating of the construction, which is a challenging issue for something already constructed. We're talking about a spray applied foam or some of it, very expensive, as are the fire sprinklers, as is the ADA path of travel, and these are things that when someone would come in and apply, we would tell them, you know, these are your requirements. You know, then you weigh your options. Do I want to do this? It's going to cost X amount of dollars. Unfortunately, the building was built, so you're telling someone after, by the way, path of travel, fire rating, firewall, potentially sprinklers. That's how we end up where we are.
Okay, thank you, John. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
You're welcome. Thank you. And Councilwoman Mar, go ahead.
So most of my questions have been asked, and I just have one for John, John May. And it has to do with, so you know, and then this is, again, because I'm not knowledgeable on the demolition. So if there was demolition, does that include foundation and everything? Let's say, is there an opportunity for the applicant to, I mean, I suppose if he wanted to do this, it would be a much smaller unit. I was out there, I looked at it, I read the staff report. It seems like if it was done properly in the beginning, it would have been smaller and fit to the lot line. So if if the applicant does concur, or if we decide there has to be demolition, does it have to be demolished? The whole foundation demolished? Is there anything that they can salvage and start over in that regard?
Well, that's probably the good news of the presentation is that it's a moment frame building. It's bolted together. It's actually bolted to the foundation with anchor bolts in the foundation. So all those bolts can be taken off. The building can be what we would call laid down, and essentially could be rebuilt somewhere else. I mean, obviously with the labor, but it wouldn't be demolished. It would just be taken down. It's an erector set. It's a large, expensive erector set. So it can clearly be taken apart. We would not require anything, the foundation to be removed in any way or demoed. That's flat work, and we don't, you know, that's not what we're going after. And then potentially you could reuse some of it or all of it, like we said, somewhere else, or sell it, or do some, there's options there. It's a valuable piece of material, so you could even potentially sell it.
Okay, thank you very much.
Any other last questions from the council? Okay, not seeing any. I will go ahead and turn the time over then to Mr. Cunningham, who I understand is the business owner and the appellant in this case. So Mr. Cunningham, welcome.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Thank you for joining us tonight.
So most all of what John said was correct. He's been actually super helpful throughout the process. One of the main points to bring up on the project, and I don't know if you read the materials or not, was initially, we did this because we saw something similar up the street. I walked in and I asked the city, building department official about doing something similar. And they gave me the outline of you can do extra storage, you can't attach it to the building, you can't put electrical in it, you can't put plumbing in it. Basically gave me a checklist. And we went over that with the building owner, and I saved up the money. He decided to hire the person that last worked on the property, Thompson Steel Services, to put it up, and they put it up. And that was in 2013. Not 18. So I wanted to make that correction when the first portion was done. The second correction, or the one thing that John said, was it had become clear to the city that it was built across multiple property lines, only about 2/3 of the way through the process. The existing building goes across multiple property lines. And before I had any real money in all the professional services that John said, represented us well with the city, the engineering firm, the drafting firm, the surveying firm, the city of Auburn sent me a letter on May 4th, 2018. So right at the beginning of the process, Exhibit 20, if you have that says it's built across multiple property lines and it would require a merger. So the city knew and told me about the issue right in the beginning of the process, and we were working to rectify that. And where that ended was the city basically saying that we couldn't merge the lots or do anything retroactively because of a city council resolution. Let me find that here. It says the Resolution for Planning Commission 1813 doesn't let you apply retroactively to do any of that work. Well, that resolution was, in October of 18, which was after we applied and 5 years after we had first put up the original part of the structure by Thompson Steel. So the only thing I wanted to point out is the city knew about these issues and even wrote to us about them on that exhibit that I mentioned, 20, right at the beginning. So to say that it just found out, after we spent tens of thousands of dollars in professional services, 2/3 of the way through the process is fairly inaccurate. And as far as the electrical goes, or anything else in it, I mean, it was that original deal was, the contractor's out of business now, but we didn't put it up ourselves. There was a different contractor that did the roofing portion. They had both done work for Kessler's in the past that own the complex. So I guess what I'm saying is previous actions, I guess I should have got it in writing from the city, but I will say I built a building, or had a building built on my personal property before this building, which no one would ever see. There's no neighbors can see it. You'd never get in trouble for it. I came in, I asked what was required. They told me that needed to be permitted. I went through the whole process, and that was before this. This is a highly visible business. So I tried to start the process the same way. I mean, I came in and asked, and I've essentially been told, well, those people don't work here anymore. And I've tried to talk to, for instance, some of the long delays in it. To be frank with you, I was pretty desperate for somebody to help me with this. And John very begrudgingly sent me to an engineer, Craig Rowland, that's behind the city, to try and help me out as like a sign of humanity, kind of. It turned out the guy was horrible, and that's what created such long delays. And then we hired, 2 new professionals, Dennis Meyer from Possumus and Glenn Scheller, that the city both said they liked working with to work through the process. And, you know, we kind of never would have got to this point if it was brought up right at the beginning. I mean, John did say, you know, you may run into problems and not be able to finish this. So I'm not going to say that he didn't. He told me that, and he warned us the first day he was there about it. But the conspicuous thing about it is he also said, we're not here to shut you down. We're just here to make this, you know, not a public safety hazard and help you through the process. And that process thus far has just been spend tens of thousands of dollars to get a demolition notice that says we can't rectify anything, which I don't know. I'm at a loss. I mean, I'm really at a loss for it.
Okay, anything else you'd like to add before we turn it to the council for questions? I think you have the property owner as well. I don't know if you want to give any time to her, but
I think one other thing I would like to add is, hang on one second, Exhibit 16. In the staff's comments about the demolition, which is my Exhibit 16, it has a highlighted section of it. It says this notice of violation abatement order has an effect on the property owner's economic interest, but has not driven him from business or caused injury or ability for the business to function. We've grown this business. What I found was a great avenue for us to grow this business is the train station behind us. Probably 4 years ago, I had a customer, he broke down in our area, and he was from I think Redwood City. And he didn't, you know, he was debating getting his vehicle towed, whatnot. Well, turns out I told him, well, you might be able to take the train. Well, what that's turned into is him telling friends, us advertising to people that we're right next to this train station in Auburn. So we have all kinds of customers, probably a little over $1.5 million a year in just this work that we draw from the bay that come up on a Monday. They drop their vehicle off, they take the train back, and then they usually come up with family on their way to Tahoe, pick their vehicle up to jobs that are generally in the $4,000 to $13,000 range, and then they continue up on their vacations. And it's turned into a great thing for us. I mean, I pitched to them that they can go into Old Town, eat there, do this, do that, continue their way to Tahoe. And I have all these customers that love the train station, love where we're at. And instead of spending $40 at In-N-Out on their way through, we get these $5,000 to $15,000 tickets out of them on a regular basis. And for the notes to say it has not driven us from our business or caused significant injury just isn't the case. I mean, you can look at Exhibit 11 that I provided. I had to rent space in Newcastle to just store some of the stuff that was in there. And I'm still trying to find more space to where we can still operate out of Auburn, but have places to store all our goods and operate. And you can see from the Exhibit 12, 13, and 14, just a few of my commercial customers, most of which we draw from outside the Auburn area, Roseville, come up the hill to see us. We've been turning their work away because we can't function properly. So it's really been pretty debilitating. And I've been looking, I've been looking for another building, that's 7,000 or better square feet in somewhere close proximity, and there's nothing available. I found a building. Is everybody familiar where Mickey's Boots was on Lincoln Way? So I viewed the Mickey's Boots building, and a lot of what we do is outdoor recreation. I met with the owner, and I told the owner I'd buy their building. It's 8,000 square feet in the heart of Auburn, and we move our retail portion there, and that would leave enough space for our service portion where it is. And my only requirement for buying the building was that it needed to come with an entitlement to put a door in the side of the building. So here he has an offer for us to buy his building, keep all of our business in Auburn. All he needs to do is get an entitlement for one door. And we couldn't close the deal because he said he didn't want it. Whatever happened at the city of Auburn was too much work for him to go through to get an extra door put in off the side street. So, I mean, I've tried in many ways to make this work. And I've even told city that if you look at the aerial photos, the section that was just an overhang in 2013, no walls, no doors, nothing. If we were just left with that overhang, we could operate fine. The enclosure part of it has just reduced the police department having to come chase criminals from breaking in and stealing stuff out of our yard, which has been great because they used to be at our place all the time from theft. But we can deal with the theft if we literally just have the sun off of our people's heads in the inspection area for some of the commercial work that we do. I mean, I would consider that a win. If we had to tear down 80% of this building and leave just that sunshade, I could still function, but I've been told we can't. And we've gotten used to it since 2013. We've grown into it. And when I've asked about the other buildings on our property that are not permitted, and the one that was the inspiration down at Echo Valley Feed, which I provided aerial photos to staff, all I've been told by multiple people was, well, you can turn them in if you want, which I've never done. It doesn't make sense to me.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Cunningham. I will go ahead and turn it to the council for questions of the appellant. Councilwoman Downing Calvillo, go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Cunningham. I just now was trying to take a look at the additional information that you provided. I'm sorry, I didn't know that it was here, so I was scrolling through it. I just wanted to clarify, you indicated that you actually constructed the building or had it constructed in 2013, not 2018. Is that what you had said, Mr. Cunningham?
So do you have the aerial photo that staff provided you of the building?
Yes, I do.
You see how there's two different roof colors?
Mm-hmm.
The portion closest to the building, which is the vital portion to us, just the overhang that I'm referring to, we'd be fine if we had it, was constructed in 2013 by Thompson Steel Services.
Okay, so just the overhang was constructed in 2013.
Correct.
The rest, go ahead. I'm sorry, go ahead.
The other portion was constructed in 2017. And the day that John showed up, there was a couple panels that the contractor hadn't put on yet. He put those panels on. That's what John was referring to as finishing up. He literally didn't finish installing the doors. There's a lot of loose ends. There's no trim. It's not fully weather tight. He said, well, the city's here. I can't show back up now all of a sudden. So he basically left without getting paid, and he was 99% done. I mean, it's literally one day away from being done, but he did not finish it, the trim or the pieces on the corner to make it weather tight, and nor did we finish it after the city said stop.
And when did you first come to the city? Did you come to the city when you constructed the overhang back in 2013? I actually came to the city first in 2010. The reason I came to the city in 2010 is because I'm basically rode Arab, had Arab endurance horses and was a customer of Echo Valley. And the owner of Echo Valley had torn down an old building because it was a dock height building. And he had put up a larger, maybe 4,000 square foot building that was just a steel shell. And I thought, man, that would work great for us to have more space. And I went in and I asked the city, forgive me, I don't know the gentleman's name that used to work the counter. John said he doesn't work there anymore. But I asked him if we could build something similar because it would really work well for us. And the gentleman we spoke to at that point said that, yeah, well, you could go ahead and do that, but, it has to be the three sides. You can't put any plumbing in it. You can't put any electrical in it. He gave me a short list of things to do. I talked with my landlord about it. He was okay with doing it and spending basically half the money to do it as long as he picked the contractor. And life kind of intervened a little bit. I had a lot of health problems and was in and out of the hospital. Ended up having to get a kidney transplant and file for bankruptcy. But I recovered from that. I will say I paid back every Auburn business I wasn't legally obligated to when I filed for bankruptcy, because that's just kind of what I thought was the right thing to do. It's a small community.
So I left nobody hanging. And as soon as I had the money to do it, which was about 2.5 years later after that, we went ahead and did it.
So then when you came to the city in 2010 with the concept of the shade structure, they did mention to you that no plumbing, no electrical, but the building that you have now that was constructed in 2017 does have plumbing and or electrical, correct?
The section that went in 2017 has no plumbing, no electrical in it. So I don't get you too far lost here. In 2013, right after the overhang was completed, I actually sold the business, and the people that bought it do electrical contracting and cell phone tower work. They bought it to maintain their trucks and continue running the business. They put a bunch of outlets in it, and when I saw what they were doing, because when I was back there, they literally joked about it. They said, well, this is the only thing that's up to code in your whole building. And I had pointed that out to John just kind of as jest when he was there. It's like everything's perfect, but it is not legal because they didn't get it permitted. They went belly up. They folded very shortly. I took back over because I was still the master lessor, hired back some of the employees, and moved forward. But when it was finished, everything that I touched, I still stuck with the exact concept of no plumbing, no electrical. And to this day, there's none of that in that whole right side of it. It would be nice if there was, there should be, but there wasn't. The only reason there's not was because I was following what I was originally told.
So then when you talk about the right side or the left side,
the portion closest to the existing building is going to be the left side. The portion farthest away is the right side.
But I guess what my point was going to be is that the structure in its entirety, you're saying that there's no plumbing or electrical in the structure at all. Because it doesn't matter if it's on the left side or the right side, because it is a standalone, correct? So it's a standalone building. So I just wanted to get clarification on that.
There is electrical plugs and electrical wiring that was put in by our sublessees while I wasn't there. It is only in a small portion of the building. And if this helps you at all, we would be fine if it wasn't there. It would still serve it would serve 95% of our purpose if it wasn't there. It is disconnected right now because although the city verbally committed that they would never red tag us, they showed up with a red tag a few weeks ago, and John told me that they had to tell PG&E to cut their power or cut our power to our whole business. And in a frantic, what can I do? I invited John to come over and see that there was no wiring going into the building. We simply just disconnected. There was one grommet that fed that part of the building, disconnected it, showed John that there is no wiring running to this building, and that satisfied the city to call PG&E back and not have our power shut off.
Mm-hmm. And then just to clarify again, you said that you went to the city in 2010 with regards to this shade structure concept. You then later went to the city with the enclosure piece. When is that correct?
We initially asked the city about building a 3-sided building. We didn't do that because I didn't have the money. We just did the top portion of it. Again, if I only had the shade structure portion, even though it'd be very inconvenient, our business would function just fine. We would just have to deal with theft issues. I mean, we would function fine if they allowed us to put a 40 by 50 tarp up, to be frank. I just can't have people working out in the rain, or have parts stored out in the rain, or, I can't have it in the rain.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we took everything that couldn't get wet. Like I said, we rented that building in Newcastle. We've been actively looking for another building. There's literally nothing industrial in Auburn that's in the 7, 8, 10,000 square foot range. And the one building that we found that would work fairly decently is all the way down in Roseville, and our customer base locally is Auburn, and then we draw a lot of people from far away because we're right next to this train station. I mean, it's like a match made in heaven. We really don't want to leave, but we just can't function without, you know, the space.
Thank you. Let me see if there was anything else. I have questions for our legal attorney, but I'm just going to confirm that I don't have any more for you at this point. Let me see. I think that staff had mentioned something about building a similar structure on your property that would just be on your parcel, and that you had indicated that that would not suffice. Could you maybe address that a little bit? Why you could not relocate it?
Sure.
Or make it smaller, or I mean,
so making it smaller would be an option, but it would be the reason it's a hard option is because John had mentioned that it was the building was bolted together. You can take it apart like an erector set. It is in fact not. It's the whole frame of the building is welded together. It's one piece. So you can't just bolt it together. The thing's got to be, you know, cut apart. It's basically a disaster to take it down and reassemble it. And I don't, he wasn't trying to mislead you. It's just an honest mistake, I'm sure. But the other issue that comes to play is when I originally did this, Bill Kessler was the one who applied for the permit, which was the building owner's representative, or it was the building owner's son. And he was for the project. And the project then got turned over to a gentleman named Guy Gibson because I believe Bill's mother was incapacitated or in a rest home or something like that. So I was then dealing with the city and Guy Gibson, who was for merging the lots together. And then after Miss Kessler's passing, now Kelly Manos, who is Bill Kessler's daughter, is in control of the complex. She runs it now. And the attitude of who we originally rented from, Bill, was to basically get the thing, you know, legal. So it was a decent long-term investment for them after I was gone, and was working towards that path. So was the trust attorney. And since Kelly Manos has been managing it, her stance is basically to tear it down, not incur any expense, and get the thorn out of her side. And in a way, you can't blame her because they don't have to expend any money to do it. So in a way, it's not what I was originally committed, you know, by management or the preceding management, but it's what makes the most sense for the owner. So as much as it's kind of breaking the commitments made to me, it makes the most sense for their business to just tear it down and be done with it. Because essentially at the heart of it maybe is I have a real long-term lease. I've been there, you know, over 10 years now, and it's below market. And if I leave, they could probably rent it for 1.5, 2 times as much. And that only makes good business sense to them. All you have to do is tear down a building, and then we're forced to leave because we can't operate, and they get more money every month. So in a way, I can't blame her, but that puts us out of business.
I did remember another question I had with regards to your appeal. In the appeal itself, your reason for appealing was you stated that you were seeking more time to comply with the notice of violation order. And you also obtained a demolition permit. So I was a little unclear. In your appeal, it appears that you acknowledged the action taken, that you had accepted that and you were moving forward, but you were appealing because you were seeking additional time in which to comply with that order, which in its own right is a little bit strange when you think about an appeal. You know, it seems like you would be appealing the action taken versus appealing for the purposes of asking more time. But regardless, you did obtain a demolition permit. So I'm just trying to, understand. It seems like you might have been in one place at one time and you've moved over to fighting it now. So if you could just maybe speak to that a little bit when you originally filed the appeal, and what was your objective with that based on the language that was in the appeal itself?
Absolutely. So I filed the appeal, not because of the code violations that John mentioned. I understand those. He's informed me well of them, and like I said, been extremely helpful. I filed the appeal because at the heart of this, you know, I haven't done, you know, you can say it's a he said, she said with the city. And, you know, I've had a lot of people since tell me that it was a very unintelligent decision in not getting something in writing from the city. But I had no reason to think that I was in an adversarial relationship with the city and my business. If somebody told me to follow rules, you know, I followed the rules. So the reason for the appeal is twofold. I originally asked about it, or three things. I originally asked about it. No one has made any effort to try and enforce these codes or any of this action on any of the other people on my very property. There's another building that's known about, and Echo Valley, and I don't want them to. I don't feel like, and that's why I never called and complained. When I was told by different staff, well, you can call and complain, I never did it. It's not my nature. I'm not trying to drag people down with me. I'm trying to get everybody treated fairly. The reason I appealed basically was I was told because of Planning Commission Resolution 18.3 that we couldn't get the retroactive variance. Well, after spending tens of thousands of dollars, that's very disheartening when on Exhibit 17, or no, hang on, my apologies. Exhibit 20, dated May 4th from the city of Auburn, the city knew that it was 3 separate parcels, and nobody seemed to think anything of, having me go through all the expense of all these, professional engineers and surveyors and all this stuff. It was known. So to go through a couple years long process and say, you can't do this because of this city council or planning commission resolution that was passed by city council, 6 years after you originally put it up, and a half a year after you applied for permits and the city already knew that this was an issue, seems like just a major trampling on, public trust of how we're treated, I guess. I just don't. So that's why I appealed it. And the reason there was a demolition permit pulled was Kelly Manos, who is now the general partner of Kessler, is who I was describing, would rather just have the building torn down because it doesn't cost her anything to do as such. So originally we had, I had the old owner put in my lease that this building was a joint venture between the two of us, and the owner, Kessler Rentals, paid out of their checking account contractors and a lot of the bills to do this, because they agreed to it. But Kelly doesn't want to keep going with it, and she's the one in control now. So she pulled the demolition permit. She said that she wouldn't stand in my way of appealing it because Kessler Rentals had agreed to do this with me, but essentially she wasn't going to help me, and she wanted to take the most expedient way to get rid of the problem, more or less. Which, like I said, from a straight business perspective, I totally understand. But it's we've taken a space in Auburn that is housed, a recycling center with one person working there, sometimes two, and 2 other failed businesses, and we're on track to probably get close to $4 million in sales this year in a little obscure space, drawing people from all over the region.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cunningham. That concludes my questions for right now. I might have some later, but thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is it possible for me as the property owner to speak here?
Yeah, Kelly, if you don't mind, let us, the council, go through questions for Mr. Cunningham, and then before we open up to the public, we'll give you an opportunity to speak. Is that all right?
That's fine. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Councilwoman Amara, you had your hand up.
Thank you, Mayor Berlant. I actually have, since Mike, since you gave your presentation, I have a question for John May. What I heard you say, Mike, and this question is directed toward John, that 95% percent of your business, you'd be happy if you can put up the shade structure, because that would be helpful for your business to continue. So I guess, John, I don't, want a little background on why the shade structure, or is there, if they demolish the existing building that's in non-compliance, can he put up a shade structure?
Sure. I will. This is the first I've heard of that option. It's not something staff had looked into. It wasn't one of the options presented in pre-development by Mr. Cunningham, so I really can't speak to it. Although looking at the layout, it's still going to have a problem with setbacks on the rear property line, because it looks like what would be the 2013 structure is encroaching upon the rear property line. So some of those same problems are gonna be in place. One thing I did want to mention, I apologize for especially to you, Sandy, for thinking the structure was bolted. I truly did. I haven't got a chance because we didn't do inspections to actually, or plan check, to examine the structure that thoroughly. Typically, those are bolted together. Welded brings its own set of challenges. I want to be clear about that, including special inspection of all the welds. And there's multiple different challenges for a welded construction versus bolted. But clearly, a welded construction can't be laid down like an erector set. So I apologize for that. One thing I also want to make clear is there's probably some miscommunication or misunderstanding about the use permit or the variance process. That being, it's in the letter, but it's not the primary function of the letters we have sent the appellant. The building or that building would never be eligible for variance because it doesn't meet the legal requirements for a variance, what it takes to get a variance. The use permit process would not alleviate the setback issues on that property as that building sits. And we looked at that to find a solution. Even though the letter says you can't do the use permit process, we examined that process through this pre-development procedure to see if it was something we could do to legalize the building. And so even if we could, the letter says you can't use the process. Even if we could use those processes, it still wouldn't legalize the structure in relation to setbacks and those type of things. So the letter encompasses a lot of items. We try to include everything, all the violations. That is not the major, or at least it's one of the items. It's a big item, but it's not the driving force behind the notice of violation.
Okay, thank you. And Mike, do you have anything to say about the shade structure?
I would just say that the only portion of the shade structure that is closer to the Union Pacific Railroad than the existing structure, and I've mentioned this before, is a piece of tin that could be removed in 5 minutes. So although apparently it's a little in the setback, it's the same as all the existing building.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Councilwoman Mackey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Cunningham, when you first came to the city in 2010 and talked to who I assume was probably Reg Murray, before he retired, about putting up the overhang or the shade structure, did he mention anything to you about perhaps needing a permit for that?
He said if I attached it to the building, I'd need a permit. If I put electrical in it, I would need a permit. If I put plumbing in it, would have need a permit.
I'm just talking about the overhang.
No, ma'am. No, ma'am.
Okay. So then
And I don't want to blame somebody that I don't know. So I don't know that it was Reg Murray. I just know that the gentleman doesn't work there anymore. And I do know it was a gentleman, not a lady. It's been 10 years.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it doesn't matter. So who built that building?
Thompson Steel Services did the skeleton, and I had a company, gosh, I think they were called French Fence Design. It does sheet metal and fencing. They did the skin. I don't remember if they charged through Thompson or if they got paid separately. I'd have to ask. I'd have to ask the old landlord, Bill, because I believe he wrote the check for that.
So your contention is that these people built the building, but you didn't need a permit for that construction?
Correct.
Or did you assume that Mr. Kessler got the permit? Did
No.
anybody ever ask about a permit? Is what I'm asking.
I came in originally and I asked about building the same structure that Echo had built and what I would have to do to build a storage structure. And basically the key points that were given were just, it can't be attached to the building. It can't have electrical. It can't have plumbing. And like I said before, I had come into the municipality before, you know, 3 years before, because I was doing something similar at my home that no one would ever see in a million years.
Yes,
And I was told you had to get it, and I went through the proper process. You know, if you.
So my point is that whether you put electrical in or attached it to the building or any of those things, did you realize you still needed a permit to put the structure up?
Not till John showed up.
You didn't think that you thought you could build a 2,200 square foot building in the city of Auburn without any permits?
If it had 3 sides and those requirements. Honestly, if you're asking me my opinion, did I think it was a little bit screwy? Yeah, I was surprised at the reaction. And I even told John May in passing and talking with him, you know, because I think John mentioned something about when we were talking, you know, the way you described this thing, it sounds like a storage shed. You know, did you describe, is that how you described it when you originally came in? And I said, I never discussed the square footage of it. I just asked what the requirements were.
So your contention is nobody ever told you needed a permit? I keep asking you this question and you keep going around it.
Correct, ma'am, yes.
Nobody ever told you needed a building permit no matter what? Your building?
No, incorrect. The gentleman I spoke with said that if we had electrical in it, had plumbing in it, you know, all these list of things that you have to pull permits. So essentially,
Well, yeah, you'd have to pull permits for those things, but to build a building, you need a permit too. And nobody told you that, even a 3-sided building.
that's correct.
Okay.
And ma'am, it would have been when we had it done, it was much cheaper for them to just do a lean-to. In other words, attach it to the edge of the building instead of build a whole separate steel skeleton. I want to say it was like $5,000, $6,000 different. And we specifically had them do it separate steel skeleton just to essentially follow that rule. I mean, it would have been so easy to do it attached to the building.
So are you not using that building now?
We are not. I rented space in Newcastle, and we've been storing things there for the meantime as much as we can. And I've got employees that I've put that are commission-based employees that I've had to put on salary because they can't make enough wages essentially on commission with our current configuration, how restricted we are.
So the other thing you mentioned was that you were going to rent the building, Mickey's Boots building downtown. And the owner of the building stated that it was too much effort to put a door in the side, or he didn't want to deal with putting a door in the side of the building that would have been required.
No, ma'am. I asked, I offered to buy the building for the purchase price of the building, not a reduced rate. And the only requirement I had, because I was what I felt embroiled in a mess with the city right now, my exact words to him was, I don't think the city's very happy with me right now. I don't want another argument on my hands. So if you can supply me with the entitlement to put a door in the side so we can bring, you know, freight in and out, because the door that was there is like a 6-foot ceiling and it goes onto this, you know, shoddy wooden planks that are, you know, pretty hokey realistically. I mean, it's like 100 years old, but that we go ahead and buy the building. And the real estate agent, I believe his name was Jim with Tricom, I'd have to look it up, made a comment to me, oh, I know some people at the city, this should be easy to get done. And they got back a hold of me and said, we're not going to go through what we need to do to get the access door put in the side of the building.
Okay, that's all the questions I have for now. Thank you, Mr. Cunningham.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Schmuckley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So just to respond to that last comment, Mr. Cunningham, you know, there are state requirements, building code requirements, plumbing requirements, all kinds of requirements that we have to comply with as a municipality. So to say, I just want to cut an opening in a doorway and expand it so I can get freight in here, there's a lot of things that go into that. And I think your insinuation there was that the city is difficult to work with and it's not going to happen. At least maybe that's what you were told by your realtor who was working with you on that transaction. I've got a few questions for you. So some new information for me, and we got a late email from you that I didn't get a chance to fully go through. I was trying to read through it tonight, but you mentioned the construction for the initial addition to the building happened in 2013. You also indicated to us that it was done by Thompson Steel in 2013. I'm fairly certain Thompson Steel is a fairly reputable company. I looked them up on the internet. They didn't pull any permits for the addition of this structure adjacent to, it's not attached to, I get it, but they didn't pull any permits to your knowledge for
No,
this?
sir.
Okay. We talked about all the other subsequent things that were added to the build. Well, maybe just the electrical that was added that clearly would have required a permit. You mentioned that you've done work, I think you said, on your own personal residence that was not visible to anybody in the public, but you went ahead and pulled permits. My question for you is, why wouldn't you go through the city to pull permits at your business when you thought enough to pull permits for your work that you were doing on your own personal residence?
That was kind of exactly the point I was trying to make, sir. And before I built anything, the point I was trying to make was, prior to this very conspicuous location at a business that people are in and out of all the time, I thought it enough to come in and see what permissions I needed to do the work at my home or hire it done in a spot that you would never get caught. And I still went through the proper procedures. I came in, it started just like this process did. The only difference is when I came in and asked about the project at my house, I was told that I needed to pull permits. I needed to do this, needed to do that. I needed to have site plans. I paid someone else to do that and go through that process. So my point is that I have a track record of coming in and asking to do the proper thing, before this project, and on something that really no one would ever be the wiser. I did the same thing on this project. I came in, I used not just a concept, I used an actual example of a building known to the person that was at the counter in view of the public right away then and now as my example. And then I did something smaller.
And that was?
So hang on.
Well, that was the Echo Valley example that you cited?
Correct. And I sent you if you look at Exhibit 4, square D7, you'll see that building. Exhibit 3 shows the building in the same location that was demolished just a couple months earlier. I mean, this whole idea was hatched by someone else's work, visible from the public right away, that I took in and asked city about.
And do we know that they got permits? I think I heard you say we don't know that they got permits for it.
I actually went and asked them, and they said that they did not. and actually said that they didn't want any trouble arising from this. And I said, I haven't turned you guys in, nor would I ever. It's an innocent thing. I used you as the initial example, and I'm with the city, so I'm sorry I had to bring it up.
So obviously you run a successful business, and you, at least in my mind, seem to understand what Mr. Mayor, I think these are more comments, so I'm going to refrain. I'll yield to other questions.
Great, thank you very much. My several questions have been answered, so I am actually good. So I'm actually going to circle back. I think Councilwoman Dowdy Calvillo, you had mentioned you had a question for, I think, legal counsel. So just coming back to you.
Actually, if we were just going to open that up for questions, Sandy had touched upon the issue of the shade structure, and whether or not we could possibly just have that on site, but it sounds like that it would not work. Let me see here, because staff did address that, but and other question I had was really, is there an opportunity to make it smaller on that site? But it sounds like the appellant is saying that it couldn't as well. But for legal counsel, on that lot merger issue, maybe you can just speak to that. And on staff too, sorry, that's what I got distracted a little bit. One of the attachments that we just received tonight was a memo from staff to staff with regards to the lot merger, that it may be something that's required. And it was back in 2018, I think. So can you just speak to that? I mean, if we thought that it was already traversing multiple parcels then, and that a lot line adjustment might be required, it seems like we didn't pursue that further. If you could just maybe touch on that. And maybe I have the date wrong. I'm sorry. I'm trying to look at the attachments on a small device.
No, that's all right. The letter that I'm looking at is from March 6, 2020. It's from Tanya Ward, John May, Mark D'Ambrosi, and Chris Chardella.
No, the document I'm looking at was provided by the appellant that we just got at the last minute. And there was a memo to the building department from the contract planner. And it's dated May 4th, 2018. So you may not have seen it. Amy had emailed it to us. I'm not sure what the time was, but I didn't see it until the meeting had already commenced.
Yeah,
But
I'm looking at it. Sorry.
Yeah,
yes,
so it talks about that a lot line adjustment may be required. And so my question then for staff on that piece of it was, why didn't we explore that further back in 2018? But then for you, legal counsel, it was really just kind of expanding upon that a little bit further with regards to why a lot adjustment would not work in this particular instance. And I think what we heard was because of the non-conforming buildings on the entire site. Is that correct?
Yes.
I just wanted to get confirmation from you. Staff said that. I just wanted to get a confirmation from legal counsel that's the case.
Yes, and the reason for that is newly created lots need to be conforming in all respects under the code, because that's part of that process, is making sure that what is created and left afterwards can be used in compliance with the code.
Okay, so then for staff, again, if we thought that a lot line adjustment may be required in 2018, and knowing that we probably wouldn't be able to achieve that, it seems like perhaps we could have cut to the chase a little bit sooner rather than pursue the other avenue of permits,
Yes,
and time and so forth.
It's possible. So I'm looking back through my documents, and we received the original plan in April of 2018. And I think those comments were developed off of that. But the original plan, we suspected there were interior lot lines. We were pretty sure there were, but they didn't show them. So that's why we said may be required, because we still at that time weren't, I believe, fully confident that there were interior lot lines. Also, that plan showed the rear property as being 23 feet away, which makes a huge difference in the location of the building and brings up all these other requirements that until we got a good solid site plan, a real site plan, we weren't able to make that final determination. Could you, because potentially if it was 23 feet away, you would have conforming rear setbacks. Then there is a potential you could have joined the lots together. But
Okay.
until we got the SOMAS plan, the engineered plan, that really drove it home. And again, I just want to reiterate that, and I think even the appellate mentioned it the first day I was out there. I told him this could be a long road in which you spend a lot of money and nothing, you end up having to demo this building. And then we had several good conversations, Mike and I reminded him repeatedly throughout this process, this may end up nowhere. Yeah, are you sure you want to do this? Do you want to go down this road? So I just wanted to point that out. So it could be that when we originally received that really poor site plan, we were unsure as to whether it could be done or not.
Okay, so then just to clarify, then what you're saying is that at that time, you truly were not sure yet that a lot line adjustment may be required, that the building was actually built on 3 different parcels. I just wanted to establish that for the purposes of the record, that memo that we received today really was just, it appears this may be the situation, but further information is needed. And then when you obtained that additional information, you were able to determine that in fact, it did traverse 3 different parcels, and then that lot line adjustment would be impossible based on the rules and regulations then, as summarized by our legal counsel. Thank you. Okay, good.
All
right, thank you. I'm sorry,
Am I able to comment on that?
Mr. Mayor, I would defer to you.
Yeah, I'll let you respond to that if that's helpful for us. But just know we have gone pretty late, Mike, and the longer we go, the tighter we will get, and the less likely we will have a effective and efficient outcome. So
Okay.
go ahead.
I'll wrap this up real quick then. It was my feeling from city that we were going to need to do the merger from the date of that letter and forward. That's what was talked about in all the meetings. So I didn't think there was any kind of may about it. We were looking to doing that. To answer the question, or kind of a general question that it seemed like a couple of the council members were asking, no, I didn't realize how screwy this thing was when it initially went up. I'm very educated on the process with the county now, partially because of all John's help. But when I initially did this, I was in my mid-20s. I mean, what was anybody doing in their mid-20s? I was trying to do as right as I could and build a business in Auburn. And to the quick question of could we build a smaller building there? You'd have to ask the property owner. She can answer that, obviously. And I just want to make it really clear here. A successful outcome for me that I did tell the city, even though John said that he hadn't heard of it, was the original awning that was put up in 2013. If we have that, we operate very well and we can continue to stay there. I did put that in writing to Bernie Schroeder on multiple occasions till she kind of went dark. And then I was talking with, I believe it's Bob Richardson, on the phone and via email. And all of a sudden I lost close to 2 months there because he went dark and staff kept telling me he would call me. And then I finally found out he retired weeks after he retired. So I have put it in writing to the city that was an option to those 2 people. I'm sure you have an email record, or I could provide it if you like.
I think that the difficulty is that the shade structure itself is still constructed on 3 separate parcels. So whether or not it's a shade structure or a 3-walled building or what have you, there is some kind of a building. There is a structure that is on 3 different parcels, regardless of if it has walls or not.
Three parcels that can't be split because there's an existing building built on all of them too, though.
Yeah.
So it's.
Any other questions from the city council? Okay, before we move to public comment, I want to give the property owner, Ms. Manos, an opportunity. Kelly?
Thank you. So first of all, one council member asked about the demo permit and why the demo permit was obtained. I obtained the demolition permit under the abatement notice from the city. It required that a demolition permit be obtained within 30 days of the abatement notice. So I did that to comply with the notice. At the same time that I gave Mr. Cunningham the opportunity to appeal this decision, as a landlord, I also did require that the structure not be in use. It is a tremendous liability to my business. And as general partner, it is a tremendous liability to me personally, and one that I am not willing to accept. You know, every attempt was made, I feel, to make this structure, to do everything that we could to possibly see if this structure could be made compliant. Everything I have seen, that is not possible. My business has had tremendous costs through this whole process of the structure, and will have costs to demolition it. So there's a large impact on my business, and the innuendo that we're doing this to increase rents with another tenant or to harm Mr. Cunningham's business are not correct. We are doing this because it is a liability, and the city has ordered it to be demolished, and that is my intention, unless otherwise by this appeal process.
Great. Thank you very much for that. Appreciate that. Yeah, Councilmember Swetly, go ahead.
I just want to ask the property owner and business manager out here, if there was a way to adjust these property lines to fix the existing issue you've got, where there's a property line through an existing building that's been there probably forever, for a long time, plus kind of alleviate the issues on the two new structures that were built by the appellant, would you and your corporation, your organization, be open to that as a solution to this problem?
I would be open to considering it, but as with everything, there's a business decision to be made. There's obviously extensive costs with doing so. Also, it's not advantageous to my business to have the parcels merged. There is an office complex that is on a separate piece of property that at this point in time could be sold separately from the rest of the buildings. It's something I would consider, but I make no commitments for that.
I appreciate that, and I completely understand the caution there, but not knowing what the, I'm looking at the site map where the property lines were displayed. I could see a very easy adjustment, and I'm not speaking for the city and all of the technical requirements. I'm just kind of looking at potential solutions here. But if we could wrap, I'm looking at these as displayed in our staff report on the site plan from Solmus. This is item number 7 in our staff report. But if the lot line,
Councilmember Swetly, what page are you on?
I'm on page 86, Mr. Mayor. If the lot line that currently cuts through the old building, that heads kind of north-south-ish, it's kind of oriented in the, in the western orientation, but there we go. And I'm going to, if I can point to this, Mr. Mayor, that would be fantastic, but I'm not sure I can. So I'll try to describe it. As we're coming up from the south, as we intersect, as that property line crosses or cuts across that existing building, the old building, the one that has some graying on the roof material, if we could turn that property line and head, I'm going to say in the east direction, around the front of the building, to the north, and then either intersect the very northernmost property line or wrap to the west back and go north somewhere else closer. But we could envelop the entire existing building and the entirety of the new structures I guess that would be the question I would have for the applicant, if they would be open to that, if there was an amicable solution to adjusting lot lines. Now, that's a process, that takes time. That doesn't alleviate any of the other code issues that are existing in the structure. The two structures we're talking about, the old one from 2013 and the new one, but I guess I want to know if the property owner would be interested in, or the owners would be interested in possibly entertaining that adjustment.
So that adjustment would be leaving the current structure in its space, or no?
Correct.
I would be open to considering it. Again, financially, there's a very large financial impact on this, as we already do have a tremendous amount of money in this project. Also, the concerns of parking. If you're familiar with the area, parking is a big issue.
Yep.
And the green space, other such requirements may make it too costly.
But other
or
than cost,
potentially difficult.
yeah. So what, other than cost, you're not opposed to entertaining options to moving lot lines around to kind of try to get everything in compliance?
No, that's been the whole point of the pre-development, was to try to see if there was a path to make the structure compliant. But it's my understanding that there are other issues with the structure itself than just the parcel lines.
Well, some of the issue, well, I'm not a building professional, but I know that John has mentioned some of the issues are fire ratings and different things like that. Some of them are setback encroachments. This wouldn't solve all of the issues associated with these additions, but they might make it more practical to solve those remaining issues if we can solve some of the big issues where we have, fire rating walls and different things that are required by moving lot lines around. So thank you for that. I just wanted to get your sense whether or not you were open to those types of pursuits, if they made sense financially.
I'm open to considering it. I'm not open to committing to it.
I understand that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'll turn it out to the city clerk to see if there's any public comment on this item.
There's no public comment.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I just wanted to follow up on Councilman Spokley's discussion about the lot line adjustment. If I could just take that a step further and ask staff to, if everybody were in agreement to the lot line adjustment and it was properly, we were able to merge it. If the other violations were something that could be addressed while keeping the structure intact, or if it's still not an option. I mean, can John, can you perhaps discuss that? I mean, if we were able to make it work with regards to a lot merger, are the other problems surmountable or not?
Well, I mean, I think I can't really answer that question only because typically the building code allows you to build anything. So it's all a matter of cost. That would have to be weighed by the owner and the applicant. For instance, I mentioned in the report and in my verbal, if the building is detached, which it is, you would have to have a compliant path of travel to Nevada Street. That's the ADA path. Could be quite expensive, take up room, cross property lines. So those are questions for the owner. And I'd like to point out any lot line adjustment again has to create a compliant lot. So that existing building in the rear is not currently non-compliant. The existing building, not the unpermitted building.
I understand that. I think that Councilman Spokley was suggesting, I know we can't point and draw, but it sounded
Right.
like what he was suggesting was that the lot line adjustment occur that would allow that existing building to be in one parcel as well.
Oh, yes, potentially. Yeah, so there are solutions beyond that. It's just a matter of cost. It's all a weighing cost and whether the owner and the appellant could bear that cost.
I will say, ma'am, that I got quotes for the firewall John spoke to. They were around $38,000. And And if that was the last straw, we would be willing to pay for it.
But it sounds like there are many other issues with regards to ADA access and things of that nature. So it seems like it's not just one or two things. It appears that there's a whole laundry list of issues that are of concern or that are a violation, so to speak, that would need to be rectified. Just trying to get an idea of, you know, the magnitude of those issues and whether or not you've had an opportunity to truly determine whether or not it's cost effective for you.
And I'm going to interject here real quick. I think, again, my initial question was related to the property owner's openness to entertain a lot line adjustment, but it's not the only issue, as John pointed out and as Alice pointed out. There's other things that have to be complied with here, and there's a solution here. It's just a matter of how much does it cost, and are both parties open to it, and will that be acceptable to the city? I hate to see it. Well, I'm getting into the comment side of things, so I'll hold it. I'm sorry.
Councilmember Fluke, why don't you, if Amy, if you can take this off the screen, and then thank you very much. Councilmember Fluke, go ahead and you can just start us off with comments, and let's hear from all five of us and see if we're all on the same page, or at least a motion that can be put on the table.
Great, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I believe that, you know, in reading the information provided to us and hearing from both the appellant as well as the underlying property owner, which was very helpful to kind of understand her position, I don't want to impede business. I want to figure out how we can solve this and keep business moving forward. Obviously, there's a demand here. We've got a successful business who's operating within our city. I don't want to impede that or harm that in any way. The idea of a lot line adjustment, assuming that all parties are okay with it and assuming it meets the ultimate requirements of all of the state codes that the state and city codes that we have to comply with at the city of Auburn, it might be a reasonable solution to look at. Yes, there's going to be upgrade and compliance issues that have to occur. I think I heard the appellant mention that there might be opportunities for us to do that. I don't want to see stuff that's put up that's functional demoed. If there's a way to bring it up to health and safety codes, if there's a way to bring it up to city codes and move some lot lines around and do some improvements on these structures to meet our requirements, if we can avoid it. So I don't know where I'm leaving this, other than I hope that the city and the applicant and the property owner can work together to come up with a solution. If they can't, then I think, you know, the initial abatement of demoing the buildings probably is necessary. As much as I hate to see us taking stuff down that's enabling commerce, if it's not safe and it's not meeting all of the codes that we're required as a municipality to comply with, then it just has to be done. So I guess I'm hopeful that there's going to be a solution that can be met with the city's input, with the property owner and the applicant's input, to move lot lines around, do improvements that are necessary, and keep the structures that are there. Those are my comments.
Great, thank you. I'm going to go backwards. So Councilwoman Navarro.
So, Matt, I guess I have a question for my fellow councilman, Matt Spookley. Are you saying that you would entertain a motion that would basically bring it back to staff to come up with a resolution based on everything we've heard?
No. I'm maybe just providing direction to staff I think staff would agree, and staff can correct me if I'm wrong, and the city attorney can certainly correct me if I'm wrong, but if the applicant and the applicant's consultants can come up with a solution that solves our issues, then, and allows us to keep the structure in place. Now, it sounds like there's some setback things that are going to require some modifications. So it's not going to be this magic wand where everything gets to stay where it is. I think there's some inherent issues in reading through the staff report that it's going to require some adjustments. But if those adjustments, which I think might be relatively minor, if the firewall is alleviated by moving property lines around, if the detached versus attached can be resolved, meeting all of our California building codes and all of our city building code requirements, then there might be a solution. And all I'm saying is, I guess I'm directing staff to work with the applicant, work with the applicant's consultants and the property owner, because obviously the property owner has to be in agreement with all of this. She's ready to move on and comply with the abatement orders. But I guess I'm hopeful that there might be some amicable solution to make adjustments to property lines, make improvements to existing structures, and things moving forward.
Yeah, and I get that. I completely understand. I completely agree. I think obviously I don't want to harm or impede business, and sounds like this business is thriving. It sounds like a lot of things. However, a couple of things. Number one, I think they've been working for a couple of years to try and come up with a resolution, and there hasn't been success. And however, I mean, if we're asking for more, I guess it's unclear what you're asking for, because I want the same thing. I'd like resolution. However, before us today, I see that we have to either affirm, modify, or dismiss the notice of violation. Does that mean maybe for Attorney Gary Bell? I mean, are there time limits? Do we have to make a decision right now in terms of the demolition of this building? It's unclear of what we're asked to do and what direction we want to go based on what I've heard.
I was just going to say, Councilwoman Amara, on that, I think there's another option here, and Gary can obviously weigh in, but I think that we also have the ability to continue the public hearing, which is what we're doing right now. This is the hearing for the appeal. So we could certainly, if it was the council's desire, continue the hearing to 45 days, if that were the time limit, whereby we would ask the parties to get together and discuss these issues, discuss the lot line adjustment, if they were able to make that work so that it was a conforming lot line adjustment. And there was a commitment from the appellant to make whatever corrections and modifications that were necessary to bring the violations into order. I think that we would certainly have that as an option, but I would, if we went down that route and we provided a time frame, the council could say, like I said, 45 days, 60 days, what have you, that it could then come back to the council. There would need to be an agreement in writing that there was a commitment that these corrections would be made, and there would need to be a time frame for those corrections to also be made. And then we could certainly review this again. So Gary, I think, again, I believe that that's an option that we would have, that we could continue the hearing.
Yes, I agree. Yeah, the council can always continue the hearing.
Mm-hmm. So for that purpose. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Gary, are you able to answer Sandy's first question?
Yeah, and the other three options are to affirm it in full, which is to uphold everything that the city staff has already done, modify it in some way. So that could be a modification to what's being ordered or how it's being ordered or the timeline for it being ordered, or to overturn it, which is essentially to reject it in full. So any of those three options, there's discretion. You all are bound by substantial evidence in the record, which is the evidence that was presented here this evening and in the packet and agenda packet, and what Amy provided the additional information from the appellant this evening. So you can take any three of those or continue it.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Noir. Councilwoman Mackey.
So, what a can of worms. So my suggestion would be to affirm the notice of violation, but give the appellate 60 days to figure out a way to make this lot line adjustment work, and work with Ms. Manos and see if they can get it to work. If not, then 60 days from now, the notice of violation is ready to go. Is that possible, Gary?
It is, yes. So I would say
State
that
order.
that's a modification
Mhm.
essentially to what's being ordered, but yes.
Right.
So Gary, we would then, if that were
Instead
the
of
case.
just a second, Alice,
Sorry.
just a second. In other words, instead of just kicking the can down the road another 60 days, we would not put the notice of violation in place until at such time 60 days had elapsed and they have or haven't come to a conclusion on this. Then if they do, then we can change it and take away the notice of violation. It's my, well, okay, that's all I have to say.
So Gary, we could almost issue the notice of violation and then turn around and stay that and to stay that note, that order. I mean, that's what we could do, stay it for 60 days
Yes. So
or whatever time frame. So
yeah, essentially modify the date of compliance for the abatement pending some other resolution. And whatever that other resolution is, if it's a lot line adjustment or if it's some other solution to the problem. I think that's what's being described.
yes, but would we need to stay it? Or we would just say that if we were to issue the notice of or we would concur with the notice of violation, and then, like I said, stay that notice for 60 days, you know, pending additional negotiations for X, Y, and Z. I mean, that's.
Yeah, or modify the abatement order to say, if this has not been otherwise resolved by a certain deadline, you will comply with what the abatement
Got it. Okay.
directs you to do.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Donna-Kivia, any other comments?
Yes, thank you. As I'm trying to get through the different options that we have with this particular appellant. You know, I agree with what Councilmember Spokley said, but I am also very cognizant that there's been discussion on this issue for quite some time. And, you know, I am willing to either continue the hearing to allow some negotiations to occur between the city, the property owner, and the appellant, you know, to ensure that the violations could be corrected there, you know, but I would want that to be very structured in that there would be a written commitment that these violations will be corrected by date certain and so forth. So, you know, I am willing to do that, to give, you know, if there is a way that we can make this work, then I'd like to be able to allow the business owner to continue operating. But really there needs to be a commitment, and a binding commitment, I guess, of achieving that. So again, either continuing the hearing or even going, you know, Councilwoman Mackey's approach with this is, you know, to actually confirm the notice. I guess it's, let's see here, our option. To affirm the notice of violation, but then to give the parties a date certain to ensure that all the violations could be corrected. I could move in that direction too. So either way.
Real quickly, Mr. Mayor, just to follow up, I guess if we have unsafe conditions out there based on our codes, I'm a little reluctant to agree with what was said. I think I heard from the applicant or the appellant that there was, you know, they weren't using that space at this time. So I would want that clarification before I'm comfortable moving forward.
Mr. Cunningham, I realize you have your hand up. You've had your opportunity, so unless there's something earth-shattering to add, I'm going to actually turn to our city manager, who hasn't had an opportunity to speak.
Yeah, Mayor and Council, just really quick, kind of along the lines of what's being alluded to here. One of the things that we would ask, realize that this is a code enforcement hearing. It's not necessarily the denial of a planning application or anything, but one of the things that I think that we would request from the staff perspective is that they would make application for what they're suggesting. Absolutely, we will work with them. One of the things, they've already had SOMAS come in, as far as whatever's been explored regarding setbacks and alignment and doing some of these things. But I think one of the things that we would ask the property owner to do is to make application to do what they're doing, obviously to allow us some time to process the application, work with their engineers and do that. So if the negotiation would be encompassed within the framework of a planning application, that gives us the ability to then make sure that everything's in writing, all the commitments are there, and if there are any costs or anything, that those would be reimbursed. But that's just it.
Great, thank you, John. So I will give some final comments and then ask for motion. I really like the idea that Councilwoman Mackey brought forward of giving some additional time. I think, though, that some of the comments that were just made, though, are very important as far as the fact that there is some fire code and life safety violations. And so I think that we have to ensure that whatever we do in the next 60 days, the property or the business owner is not using that building, and that be part of the order. But I'm amenable to the idea of giving 60 days for the property owner and the business owner to submit an application with the city that spells out exactly what a potential lot change might look like and how they would then rectify the other codes. Mr. Cunningham, you made, first off, I believe, and I think my fellow council members and our city staff, at the end of the day, we're here to help make sure that our businesses are successful. And I appreciate you telling us that you, sound like you are doing very well at your location, and that's exciting. It was exciting to read the letters from other people who want to do more business with you, because you being successful, it means we're successful. Just like we mentioned about our restaurants as well. But I'm going to use your words. You said this isn't a fight with the city, and you're right. This is not a fight with the city. This is a fight with the building code. This is a fight with the fire code. This is a fight against the fire and life safety, protection of your employees, their customers, and the property. And so to me, it's unexcusable to not follow those and to not ensure that your employees, your customers are safe. And so to me, I have zero tolerance with not knowing what the laws are, and zero tolerance for hiring contractors who are required to know what those requirements are. And so I am not going to have it on my conscience to let that building burn or let anybody get injured because we knew that you were in violation of following the codes that are there for the protection of, again, the people that are in those buildings. And so I, again, would bring it back to the rest of the council that I'm amenable to adopting the order, but giving additional time should we be able to find a resolution for not just the property line piece of it, but all of the other violations that are there. And I say that with the opportunity for one last attempt, even though this is years in the making. And I also really find it very disingenuous for you to say, give all these examples, Echo Valley 5 to 6 to 7 times, and tell us you don't want to get them in trouble, but you keep bringing them up. And so to me, you're right, there may be others that are out there, but this is a code enforcement issue, and it is based on complaints, and the complaint was made, and that brought it to our attention. And so we are here, and now our job is to ensure that any complaint that's brought to us, we follow through with it. So I'll turn it back to the council to see what your wishes are.
Mr. Mayor, perhaps I could attempt to craft a motion.
Go ahead.
So
Make it
I would-
simple, Alice.
Oh, thanks, Cheryl. It's not simple, I'm sorry. That we would affirm the notice of violation with a modification that the appellant and the city would have 60 days to come to an agreement as to how all of the violations could be corrected, and that there's a commitment to that correction, a binding commitment to that correction. And if that cannot be reached in 60 days, that the order the order to demolish would then go into effect.
Can I, Alice?
Mhm.
We didn't get a chance, and as in Cheryl's words, I don't want to open a can of worms, but I'm thinking that 60 days might be a little
Not enough time.
for everybody. I was thinking more maybe like the end of the year. I think even for staff to review everything, and I just think
Okay, so by December 31st?
that I think that'd be fair.
Okay.
How long is that demolition permit good for that Kelly Manos pulled?
Do we need a second on the motion, Mr. Chair?
No.
Before? Oh, okay. I think we do, Ms. Mackey, but that's.
I don't want, I'm not talking about the motion. I'm asking a question that Sandy brings up. She wants to do it till the end of the year, which would change the motion. So I'm asking, how long is that demolition permit good for? We don't want to overrun that and make them pull another permit.
It depends on when it was pulled, and I'll defer to John on that one.
Yeah, it's good for a year. I don't have it in front of me, but I don't believe it would expire. No, because it was pulled this year. So it's good for a year.
Okay, thank you.
I would like to add to the deadlines in the current abatement order is within 30 days to pull a permit for demolition, which has already occurred, and then to commence work within 180 days of the building permit, the demolition permit being pulled, which is already passed. So I think those deadlines should be addressed in the motion from the council as well.
Well, I think that I did do that by saying, you know, initially I said 60 days, but then if we're thinking about till December 31st, 2020. Does it need to be phrased differently, Gary?
Well, it says that they have to complete work within 180 days of the permit being issued, and they're already on the other side of that.
Councilwoman Dowden-Kelvia, do you want to modify your motion?
I'm trying to think of the easiest way because it's such a long motion already. All right, so we're giving them until December 31st, 2020, and that we would also modify the, Gary, you said it was the order of demolition.
Yes.
No, it doesn't. It's good for a year, he said.
Not that, but the order itself has to be complied with within 180 days. And so
Just
the
extend
compliance
that.
with the order would be after December 31st, 2020. Because we're giving them whatever months it is, until December 31st, 2020. And if they can't reach an agreement, then the order would then go into effect.
Yes, I think it can just be modified to say work will be complete within 180 days after December 31st, if that's what the council would like.
That works for me.
Okay, any,
Poor Amy.
I'll second the motion.
okay, thank you. Any questions on the motion since it was kind of in pieces? Yeah, Councilmember Folkley.
I just have a comment, if the council will allow. I want to thank staff. I mean, we get these every once in a while, and staff, John and Jennifer work very hard and are very diligent with their efforts to document and do things per the codes that are in front of them and all the requirements that they have. We've taken an action here that I hope that they don't think is circumventing all of their hard efforts. We're really just trying to help private parties kind of work out issues. And I know that they try to do that on their end. Sometimes it takes a more formal process to kind of get folks moving in the right direction. So I just want to make that statement. Thank you, city staff, for all you've done on this effort. It's certainly very much appreciated by me. And I think we're heading in the right direction to correct this. We're just giving an opportunity to look at maybe some options that you've already brought up that might now be more seriously considered. So thank you, staff.
I agree with you on that, Matt. And really the discussion that we're having at this level can really only be made at this level. So I'm not at all insinuating that they should have taken this step, because it's really only a step that we as a body can take. So I agree.
Any other questions or comments on the motion that's on the floor? Councilwoman Moore, I know you dropped off and came back in. Just want to be clear, you're good?
Good, thank you. I'm good.
Okay.
Thank you.
With that, there is a motion and it has been seconded. So I'll go ahead and ask the city clerk to please take the roll.
Councilmember Dowden Calvillo.
Aye.
Amara.
Yes.
Mackey.
Aye.
Spokley.
Yes.
And Mayor Berlant.
And I am an aye as well. Okay, the violation has been affirmed and modified. Mr. Cunningham, Mrs. Manos, thank you very much for taking the time to join us this evening.
Thank you.
Moving on to on our agenda, item number 8, the Homeless Transient Strategic Plan Quarterly Presentation. And I believe Chief Mann will be joining us.
Bringing him over now.
Well, good evening, Mayor Berlant, City Council members, Ryan Can, Police Chief. Tonight we will be giving was supposed to be a quarterly update, but due to a lot of things going on across the country, specifically COVID, we pushed this off until today. So we've really encompassed about 9 months worth of data. We are comparing it year to date from 2020 into 2019. And I have my presentation, so I will do my best to share my screen. So bear with me. Maybe. There we go. Can everybody see the presentation?
Yep.
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Great. Well, again, our staff has worked very hard. Our CAT team leads our efforts for our homeless efforts. I mean, you start talking about the Community Action Team, which is what the CAT stands for. They do work with our partners, Placer County Probation, Health and Human Services, the Auburn Fire Department, and they continue to look for new ways to address our homeless and our transient issues. This year has been a little unique with COVID, but I'll really showcase what we started off for in 2018 and 2019. But we established that 3-year comprehensive plan with 2 goals in mind. One was to reduce the chronic homeless in the city by 10%. We found last year at the end of 2019 is we had about 41 chronic homeless in the city. And that was based on the 2 definitions that we are using for our strategic plan. Obviously, we have the HUD defines chronic homeless as a person who has been homeless in 1 year straight, 4 homeless episodes in 3 years, or a homeless person with disabling conditions. Unique thing about that definition is that someone, if they go into jail and come back out, go into jail, come back out, leads to those continued homeless episodes. And then also our definition, which for internal tracking, was to show a 12-month rolling period. So if someone was contacted within in that 12-month period, they would drop off if they weren't contacted anymore during that calendar year. And we have 4. And then reduce the number of nuisance type calls for service that we were receiving from our community. The top 5 that we selected as part of our strategic plan, as you can see there, was the camping, loitering, panhandling, trespassing, and suspicious activity. And those were really the top 5 that we found early in the development of this plan were related to our homeless and our transient issues. So those were the 2 goals that we set forth to address over the 3-year period. And we are in year 2 of this strategic plan now. Again, as a quick snapshot from 2019, we had identified, like I said before, the 41 chronic homeless. What we found too is that on an average month, our CAT team really didn't contact all 41 of them, but contacted about 17 or so on a monthly basis. And that was rotating. It wasn't always the same people. Some people could have been getting help at that time or gone for a period of time. But there you can see, as we saw, about 17 on average. Contacting on average about 7 new homeless and transients. And, the thing about the transient piece of it is we have the 49, we have Highway 80 that goes through. And so we'll see a lot of people making their way from the Reno, Tahoe area through Sacramento into the Bay Area, and in reverse from Sacramento, Bay Area through our region and out. So we saw a total of 84 contacts, but on average, we contact about 7 new homeless and transient people monthly. And then we started doing the homeless longevity component. So what we found last year was 16 of our homeless, our chronics, were homeless for about 5+ years. So what we found is that the sooner we can address some of these folks' issues, whether it was housing, something as simple as getting them a driver's license, even this year in the last couple of months, we've helped veterans get the service they need through the hospital and moved on. Some 2020 year-to-date statistics, as you can see there, and that was in the staff report. It's interesting that we've seen over the year a decrease in our camping calls, a decrease in our panhandling calls, and a decrease in our suspicious activities. Where we have seen an increase, obviously, is the loitering, and then significant was the trespassing. We found in my discussion with staff is that what we've seen a number of the trespassing calls come in from the community, but not all of them actually turn into a trespassing citation, or typically ends up in a warning. So someone is there, they're provided a warning to leave, and if they do, there's typically no other follow-up that happens. And then you can see here, year-to-date 2020, we responded to 605 of these community-generated nuisance calls. And in comparison to the same time frame, year-to-date in 2019, we've seen a 7% decrease by about 44 calls for service from last year to this year. So if we continue down this path, it continues to help us move forward to that goal of decreasing these types of calls by 10%. Another piece of the stats that we have here is that, even though we had COVID-19, it didn't stop the calls from coming in. The community was calling us, letting us know their concerns that these things were going on. And we continue to respond to those, whether it's the CAT team or our patrol officers. Here's some more stats from our community action team. 2020, we've so far done 65 operations. And during the height of COVID, we didn't do any operations. So right now in the last couple months, we've been playing catch up and adding a couple more of our operations per week. That way we can get out there and continue to address some of those concerns that are coming up. Operation costs, those are our overtime costs for the CAT component of it. And then there you've seen 29 total camps cleaned up by the city staff, including those 13 found on city property. One highlight that we have here, we talk about the CAT team as a citywide effort. We have our code enforcement, public works, the fire department, the police department, all part of this. And, we set out to identify those areas that are really could create public safety issues for us. Obviously, in the height of where we are right now is the concern for fire safety and getting rid of some of those pre-fire issues and mitigate that. So if you look at the before picture, this is the Borland area near Highway 49. This was actually one that was reported to us. We found a camp there on August 10th. We got a phone call from the interim battalion chief, Tony D'Ambrosi, and let us know that as they're cleaning it up, they came across a camp hidden in there. Well, if you look at the before pictures, you can certainly see how easy it would be to put a camp and hide in this area. It's also the fire risk. And the fire chief mentioned at the beginning of this council meeting, a significant amount of fires are started as a result of people. And if they're in this area, could be using drugs, could be having a fire of some sort, a cooking stove, a hot plate, whatever it is, could create obviously significant fire in this area and affect our residents. So this is just an example of when the fire department and code enforcement identified these areas, getting the crews in there to clean it up. Our CAT team was working that day. They came out, didn't find anybody in there. Obviously the camp was. We posted it, checked, and haven't come across anything since that I'm aware of. So this is a perfect example of what we are doing on a constant daily basis and the effort that our entire city staff is doing to address these areas. Strategic plan updates. Really, there's been no change with the camping and panhandling issues that we have moving forward with the courts. We continue to navigate around those. We're going to increase the number of police personnel who are trained in basic and advanced Sept courses. With the retirement of Lieutenant Pecoraro, we lost one of our Sept experts. So as courses continue to open up, even online availability, will send more of our staff to the Sept courses. And the use of our park exclusion process, discussion with staff on this, we have not had to use the park exclusion ordinance to address the issues. However, just the warning alone to the individuals we're coming in contact with seems to work well. Some of our goals in this year, one certainly was the implementation of our CAD RMS system in July 2020. So that system is going on just over 2 months now. I can tell you it's a huge asset to the organization. And one of the things that these last 2 months, and we'll continue to work on it, is just fine tuning how we document all the different things we have going on, specifically in this discussion with homeless. You know, one of the features of the system itself has the ability to track those people who've been issued trespassing notices. So this trespassing notice will list all the names, actually when it was issued, when it expires, and it'll stay on top of our list. So you can see the benefits of this the CAD RMS. Be able to automate so many of our different functions is very significant for us. The officers, their reporting is electronic now. So all the reports are done right on their laptops, forwarded through the system. Our dispatchers are no longer having to worry about the double entries from a RMS plus a CAD dispatch system. So just things like that have been able to help us out as an organization. The other parts to it is, as we continue to build the data and get this information in, we'll be able to develop maps, features that allow us to show our hotspots. We can identify what locations our officers are responding to more. And that way we can start addressing kind of from the most prolific offenders and start working our way through those to reduce those calls for service at our different businesses and our different locations. Continue our joint efforts between the police department, fire, probation, health and human services. And I think since COVID started, the Placer County Health and Human Services has been pretty focused on other things going on in the county. But we have actually had some success with our CAT team members being able to take individuals to Health and Human Services and get them things that they need. There was one example. We did have a homeless veteran who came into town. We were able to get him into the hospital, where we found out that once he got the help he needed, actually moved on out of Auburn, but back home. So, I mean, certain things like that are a success. The Elmwood Motel was obviously something that came up in the last couple months. Health and Human Services has been housing people there. So we did see the homeless and some of the issues there. But what we found is, some of those folks that got housed there, we talk about homelessness being a choice for some people, or even some issues with mental health. One person decided that they didn't want to be there anymore and just left on their own. So we try to help those people that want that help. Another goal of the CAT team was to go beyond just being a homeless focus, but also start working with our businesses and some other community outreach. There's programs out there that some agencies are looking at. There's the Cahoots program that brings in a lot of services to the homeless. And instead of the homeless going to a location, and it actually goes out, this service goes to them. So obviously that's not something in itself that we're looking at, but we're also looking at how do we change and how do we build on our current community action team model. And then our Sept maintenance plan for the known problem properties. Again, it goes back to that example of Borland and Highway 49. We know there's parcels in this city that will continue to, the grass will grow, needs to be mowed, needs to be dealt with. So it's just getting on that on a schedule. So we're still working on those things. Again, what's next? We just talked about our CAT team, the proactive efforts, using the data. That way we can focus on those areas that we're spending more time than we need to, or more time than we should be, to address some of those things. Community outreach, looking for those other partners that can help us address the needs of the homeless, needs of the folks that are end up being homeless. I mean, we have the eviction process. I know it's been a moratorium and put on hold, but that's something that we're going to have to continue to look forward to and identify ways of addressing that potential. Hotspot policing, the top offender location, as we continue to develop our data and using our new CAD and RMS system, we'll be able to identify those and again continue to work to address the top offenders. And then our continued problem locations and our code enforcement issues. That's the end of the report. Any questions?
Great, thank you very much, Chief. I will go ahead and open up to questions, and since I can't really see you, I will just start the backwards way of doing it last time. So I'll start with Councilmember Spokely.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Chief Canan, thank you very much for the report. I can't tell you how excited I am that we have the CAD RMS system up and running. I hope I'm not overshooting the expectations of this system, but I think it's going to give us a very much more data-driven approach to things. And I know you guys, your department has been distilling down, handwritten reports to come up with these metrics that we're looking for in our community to figure out if we're right sizing our police department and adequately funding your efforts. So I'm very excited about it. So the system's been operational for what, two months, 2.5 months now?
Just over 2 months, yes, sir.
Just over 2 months. Is the data reporting, it's real time, right? You can, at any given point in time, you can produce a report that gives you some of the metrics that we're talking about, like the address unknown. So you can pull that and you can say, we had 20 encounters in the last 2.5 months, or 200 encounters, whatever the numbers are in the last 2.5 months with our address unknown population.
It is real-time data. As soon as the dispatchers and the officers put the information into the database, it's available to use and report.
Now, I understand this was an update on our homeless and transient task force reporting, but I'm going to focus a little more on this CAD RMS system. The data is entered by the officers. Do you have to have then volunteers back up and do any supplemental reporting, or is it just one-time input, boom, it's in the system and in the database?
So if I get the question right, so the information on the part of the officers and dispatchers goes right into the CAD system, our dispatch system, and our RMS. So they're combined, they talk to each other. But to be able to pull the information, it is just generating a report. It's creating it, pulling out the information that I think we'd be asking for, like the address unknown, or if someone has an address that's homeless or transient, we're able to search that alone. And so we can pull up all those people that we've come across, that whether it's the CAT team or an officer's been out there, we can get that information just from a report now.
Okay.
So before, we had to take the information, take the FI cards or the information the officers were getting, coming back, they were handing that off to a volunteer who was then taking that data and putting it into another Excel spreadsheet That's how it was being tracked. So now it goes right into the database. The officer now just hits a button and searches. He can get all the information. We're still using a spreadsheet because that's what we had for our strategic plan, some of those highlights, but we're able to get that information right there from the CAT RMS. So there's no more paper sitting around piling up on someone's desk, getting into it whenever we can.
But our officers in the field can input our interactions with homeless and transient populations right out in the field. They don't have to write it down on paper, bring it back to the office and input it, right?
Correct. It's right there on their laptops.
Okay, perfect. Chief, thank you very much for the report. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Councilwoman Mackey.
Thank you. Yes, Chief Canan, there's nothing like a software program that finally works.
I agree.
Great. And the longer we have it, the more information we'll be able to get out of it. It's wonderful. And I commend you and those that helped you get it up and going and started. It's really going to be a great asset for our police department, our community for that matter.
Absolutely.
And, this is just one little piece of the puzzle and the reason why I am so grateful that we hired you. And I'm on my way out the door, and I feel really comfortable knowing that our police department's in such good shape and that your leadership has led us through a lot of tough times, the protests and how you engage with our community. And this is all part and parcel of it. And I really wanted to just say that right now. I feel like, and I'll probably say it again, but I just felt like I wanted to say that now. And thank you for all that you've done and all that you and your officers have been through in the last few months. That I really appreciate your efforts. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate the support. We have a great team, a lot of great men and women.
Councilwoman Downing Calvillo.
Thank you very much. And I would like to echo Councilwoman Mackey's comments, Chief. I'm just really happy to have you on board. And thank you for this report. I'm very pleased to see that the system is up and running and that it will make us much more efficient and more effective. So definitely movement in the right direction. So very good to hear. I know that the mayor had a tour of the system, and I think that I would be very interested in taking a look at it as well, just to see exactly how it works. And so forth, but very excited to have that technology as we move forward in our efforts with the homeless. I just had a couple of questions on statistics. I noticed in your report to us that you indicated that panhandling decreased by about 48%. I'm just kind of curious what you think led to that decrease. It's definitely great news. I'm just wondering, as we move forward, if there are, lessons learned that we can apply in the future.
Yeah, I couldn't put my finger on why the panhandling side of it went down, especially when we saw the increase in trespassing. So I'm not sure if maybe it was just being reported to us differently. And therefore, we saw kind of the drop and the rise in the other one. I'm not sure if it's been a discussion that the panhandling isn't so much as a crime or an issue as it once was. So it's hard to say. I wish I had the answer, but I don't have that.
Yeah, just kind of curious on that, because that's pretty much just half that it's decreased by again, and that's great. But just wondering if there was a tactic there that we were utilizing. And then
the pandemic may have had something to do with that.
See, and I would think that it may be they were concerned about getting the COVID, but I would almost think like it would increase, to be honest with you, because there were more people that were negatively impacted and maybe needing to resort to that. So it could be.
But I would imagine that folks would keep their windows rolled up if they were concerned about the pandemic, like most of us are. So
yes, I think that those that were being panhandled would definitely be less likely to participate. Then on the trespassing, you said that had increased by 41%, and I'm assuming that's in commercial and retail trespassing, or correct? And
it is.
Okay, and again, we don't really know what's driving that.
We don't right now. I could only, anecdotally say it's, when you start looking at the business side of it, and those people could go, again, tied to the pandemic and panhandling, is if they're going to actual stores where we saw a lot of people during the COVID. I mean, as much as we all struggled during that, we saw a lot of people going shopping and standing in line. And so it could have been the trespassing tied to there, where businesses were saying, these individuals, we don't want them here. They're negatively impacting my businesses. So we're asking them to leave, and the officer's getting there and saying, hey, if you don't go, you could be obviously cited for the trespassing. And so those two things could coincide. Again, I think I might be just anecdotally saying those things.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Those were the only questions that I had. And again, keep up the great work. Really appreciate all the work that you and your team are doing to keep us safe. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Chief, a couple of questions for you. We had approved the hiring of a CSO to facilitate the CAT team. And I believe you had reported, I can't remember if you reported it to us or on Facebook, that he may be going into post academy. Is he in training for another job, or do we actually have a CSO doing this work?
No, we have a CSO still doing the work. He is still full time with us. Connor Johnson's been doing a tremendous job for us. Very energetic young man. I think he's got a great career ahead of him. He's actually putting himself through the module police academy. So he has hopes of becoming a sworn police officer. As he and I have chatted about that, and he wants to continue his work here in Auburn. He would like to be the full-time police officer once he finishes his academy. So we'll see how that all works out in the future, but we still have Connor still leading our efforts on this. Like I said, you have a young man who is very energetic, very eager to do his part. Some of these people, the success stories that we've had, I mean, he's been the one driving people to Health and Human Services, helping to get them the resources they need, and even pushing for them to get the services that they need. So, he's the one, when you start talking about pulling out the data and collecting it and putting it into our spreadsheets, he's the ones doing that. But he's also, our as a community service officer, he's out there helping the staff take reports, crashes. He does a lot for us. But yeah, he's still here, and he'll be here for a while.
Okay, that is good to hear, and that's a bit of relief for me. When the pandemic hit and the stay-at-home orders went into effect, I understand the CAT team kind of went on hold. My understanding too is that the police department as well really reduced its contacts with non-emergency calls. How did that play into these types of, again, non-emergency calls?
Sure. Well, one of the things we did with the CAT team, although our focus wasn't at the time over the homeless, I mean, given the situation at that time, we had two of our businesses, one experienced a robbery, one experienced a burglary where things were stolen. We just changed the model a little bit. We've had them focus on crime prevention efforts. So it was less going to the camps, less going through these known homeless areas, as opposed to being out there, being visible, walking along those business, the old town, downtown, and hitting up some of these business areas, as well as being seen in their neighborhoods. So, they were out and about, but when you start talking about not going to some of these other calls, we continue to go to those for us. Again, we felt it was important to make sure that, even though we can maintain all of our PPE and the protection and everything else, but to be seen out there and to continue to do the job.
Okay. Well, not to lead you down then to an answer, but you don't think that by refocusing the CAT team for obviously is much more of a public safety crime prevention focus, that our camping numbers and other things like that are down because they weren't out there patrolling and looking in these hotspots?
That is possible, but those camping calls are ones that are generated by the community, not necessarily by our enforcement efforts. So the CAT team still went out there. But those were calls that were coming in from the community as opposed to our proactivity.
Gotcha.
I think some of those things, we see the homeless out there. We saw, we're trying to reduce homeless at the same time, and we saw some people get the services and get the help they need and get off the streets. But we did, and we have continued to see homeless and transients coming from the Bay Area. coming from Sacramento. I know, I can't speak for what exactly is happening at the DeWitt Center, but I know staff had told me that, a number of the folks that come through the city of Auburn are on their way up to North Auburn into the DeWitt Center for services and whatnot. So that's some of the new faces that we've seen out there. And then some of the faces that they go into the jail, they get out of the jail fairly quickly. We saw that as a part of the COVID issues. So it could be, some of those things, maybe people feeling like they saw more folks than they did. Some of them are just being out in public.
Okay. I will tell you, I don't feel like I'm seeing more. I know I'm seeing more. I drive around town and look in Herschel Young Park every single day. East Placer Park, I see homeless people hanging out there all times of the day. And that is more now than ever before. And so, maybe those are the same individuals that are just now, for whatever reason, more public. But I will tell you, just in my attempt to continue to kind of assess on my own,
Sure.
business activity and see how this may sound weird. I love to drive through Old Town every single night just to see how busy those restaurants are. It makes me feel happy when I see their outdoor dining is filled. But
Sure.
as part of that, I see a lot more. And I don't think that that's just because of an increase of me driving around town. Even talking to residents, I think there's more visibility. Now, I mentioned that, and for the rest of the group too, in talking to other cities and other officers in those other cities, they too feel that there is an increase in our neighboring cities as well, more than ever before. And so
Sure.
I'm just curious, some of these numbers being down, and maybe it takes a little bit more time for us to really crack down into, a longer term, review of the numbers. But are they really a decrease in the actual violations of these different crimes, or is it just the reporting of them by either the public or our proactivity? And I say that not to diminish the hard work by any means, because I think I echo very much what Councilwoman Mackey said. We have some of the hardest working officers in this entire county, and I am appreciative of that. I am appreciative of your efforts, but I do just question a bit some of the numbers and not question like the validity behind them, but question the impact of COVID-19 on the reporting and our enforcement impacts. And maybe that will take us more months to know. So I leave that item there, but would be curious to see in a couple more months and looking back when some of the stay-at-home orders lift and people return even more to normalcy,
Sure.
do we return back to more complaints from individuals?
Sure. Well, I can tell you in 2019, though, I mean, it's the same. We saw an increase in trespassing in the last quarter of 2019. So if those trends continue, I mean, it's only 1 year of data. So it is hard to kind of extrapolate that out and figure out what we will be looking at. But if that's any indication of what we'll be looking for in the last quarter, we'll see an even more increase of the trespassing. And to your point of the community not calling, that could be part of it. If the community said that wasn't going to bother the police department, we can certainly see that. Unfortunately, we can't control that, even though we encourage the community to call us. We are a full service police department. We'll respond to any of those calls that we get. We'll get there as fast as we can, given the staffing and other issues going on within the community. But no, I mean, you bring up excellent points. It is data, and we are using the data to kind of figure out what we are dealing with the problem. But yeah, I mean, those parks, those two parks you mentioned, staff has told me, and we've heard it, but if we're not getting the help and the calls from the community, a lot of these, we talk about our misdemeanors or infractions that, we need people to be the witnesses and, unfortunately the victims for us to move forward on some of this stuff. And the trespassing is a big one of those.
Where are we with the concept of a park exclusion ordinance?
So we have the park exclusion ordinance. We got that into place several months ago. Like I mentioned, it's one of those things where the staff, just the warning of it alone to some of these individuals that just alone has worked wonders. And I've asked that question is, are these people, when they get to the parks, are they following the rules? Just like some of those things, I understand the issues with some of the homeless, if they don't look nice, they are disheveled, they have those things, but if they're not necessarily breaking a law, It's hard to issue a park exclusion or do anything else. They have the right to use those areas just like anybody else does, with the exception if they're committing a crime. If they're committing crimes, then that's different.
Yeah, and in no means am I saying just because of their appearance that they don't belong in the park. Speaking to the young lady that waters the plants in Old Town, she walked me over to Hershey Young Park and showed me the pile of drug paraphernalia and mentioned, that she does call on multiple occasions. So it's not just that people look disheveled. I think that's a clear violation of not just park rules, but obviously the other ordinances. But I leave just with two comments, Chief. One is, there's a lot of things that, as you know, I hold your feet to the fire on the numbers, and I hope everyone gets an opportunity to go really see the RIMS system, this new system, because to hear how we used to do it, having them be written Word documents that you could really never go search unless you opened it up. So there was never a way to actually search trends, to now see how the officers, in what I took was excitement from them, be able to break up the city, look at trends, cross-reference people, dispatch and the officers all have this interconnectivity. It was exciting. It's just really hard for me because I'm years of, even before you were here, complaining about some of these issues. And now you finally have something, but we just don't have enough data really tell us, is there a problem? Is it perception? What do the numbers mean? And then you have this COVID impact. So I preface my comments to you of, I realize that, you're working your best, but I also, try to give the bigger view here that this isn't just something we've been doing since 2019. And so it's hard to look at it. The second piece of it, and I think this is where it really closes the loop on everything. Once we get this RIMS component where the public has the portal to be able to look at crimes themselves and have the internet, the connectivity for them to submit, I see camping here, and do it via an easier app or something that then draws and interconnects with the police officers, so they can see where they dropped a pin. To me, that's going to make reporting from our residents easier, because I say this every time, nobody likes to call the police department because we don't know what else emergency is occurring, and people then after the fourth time of calling and not seeing a call because they were on more important calls aren't going to call, and it makes sense. But if we can drop a pin on an app, and then when time allows, officers can go and check that camping when there's no emergencies occurring, I just think that's a huge win. And so I look forward to that component. But I just summarize with, Chief, I appreciate your efforts, and I look forward to continuing to work with you to really understand what these numbers actually mean. So
likewise, thank you so much.
This is an informational item, but I just want to check, was there any public comment on this item?
There's none.
Okay, great. If there's no other questions, Chief, we will thank you, wish you a good night, and we will move on to item number 9. Just so the council knows, I've asked John to reduce his slideshow. He told me 36, but he's got it down now to 3. So John, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you. Item number 9, the city projects and strategic planning.
All right, thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members. Just a real quick, this is just touching base with the council. Talked about the idea of strategic planning, and what I'd like to do is maybe just give you a little insight onto where I'm at on things. My overall focus, I'll share with you that every day I take 2 issues and I talk to 2 people. And I've done that practically every day in the last month that I've worked here. And really what the overall focus that I've been trying to bring is to get a review of what our organization is doing, a deeper understanding for the various business elements. I've been working with the staff to get an inventory of current projects, and that's one of the things I've attached to the agenda report, is just we're constantly updating the various projects and things that we're working on. And I will share with you that I have actually filled my 2nd notebook of just notes and things that I am taking as I meet with people and learn about things. But the idea is to kind of wrap my mind around what are really some of the issues and needs that are coming up. And, one of the things about that, I've got 5 bosses. I've got 9 people that directly report to me. I've got, the city's got all these different committees and commissions, which are awesome, by the way, and just all the interaction that I have with people. So the idea of listening and trying to hear and grasp some of the things that are going on. Amy, if you go to the next slide. So what are the main project areas? And these are immediate need because they are really foundational issues that we have. I think the number one issue that I literally was hit with within the first hour I was here was the need to look at our payroll system, that there are issues with that. But overall, I'll tell you that as I've looked at the organization, working with our finance department, admin services, obviously the housing element is a major issue. We've got to have that thing out the door by January of this year. Everything regarding COVID, but even more importantly, the idea of positioning our businesses and our economic support for post-COVID. Absolutely critical. I've been looking at our enterprises, both the airport and our wastewater and sewer. Very important assets, very important departments of the city. What are we doing? I'll be really straight with the council and everyone. A lot of it is just getting myself up to speed as far as how we operate the airport. What are some of the key things regarding our sewer? Each week, I pick 2 different regional agencies where I talk with the county. I talk with the water agency. I talk with folks. I haven't talked to the school district yet. I figured they're pretty busy. But looking at the region and getting a good understanding for that, because for a city the size of Auburn, the one thing that we know is that for us to be successful, we need to work with the outside agencies. And then finally, looking at our IT needs on various things. I learned, just like all the rest of the council, that all of a sudden, when your email fills up after only a week and a half on the job, you know that there's an issue regarding IT. So we're looking at that. Amy, go to the next slide. One of the things I mentioned in the report, and I try to emphasize to everyone, is just the idea, a really basic concept for the council, for the staff, for the community, is the things we do or don't do today will determine what we have or don't have tomorrow. And that's why, as we look at strategic planning, it's the idea that we're going to come together on and gain agreement on what we feel are the most important things that we're working on, and then we work on those things. That's everything from city services and our programs, the idea that we look at our capital infrastructure, do financial planning, and determine what are the really big items and things that we need to look at. As we look at our enterprises, the post-COVID stuff, the idea is that we work in 5 to 10 year goal setting increments, because no matter how you slice it, as we look to either go for grants, look at financial planning and financing, all those things need to fold into a time period, because the one thing we know is that long-range financial planning is critical. One of the things I've committed to the council is the idea that we would look at something that would be facilitated, something that would bring in council, that would bring in staff, that would bring in the community. And the idea is you go through, you identify the most important things, you prioritize those, you figure out the collaboration strategically that you need to do to make those things happen. You try and come up, whenever I talk about forecasting, it's the idea that you need to look out beyond the horizon on some things and realize when timing for some things can or cannot happen. And that's important because it allows you to start working on predictability, the things that you're going to be working on, because the council or the community is always saying, well, when are we going to get to X, Y, or Z? And your ability to give people an answer that's accurate is important. The city is made up of infrastructure. That's our business. Streets and amenities that go in here. That is critical. And the idea that we do the capital improvement planning, very competitive, but also I can tell you that I've heard it from this council, is that as you look at the streets and roads and when and how are we doing various things, that is important. And you're right on, because we have to be able to start forecasting when we think we can do some things, and then we need to put that into budgets. And by the way, one of the biggest things that I try to emphasize is that capital improvement planning sometimes means that some years you are doing the really big project, and then for a number of years after that, you're doing smaller projects. You just have to understand that. And then finally, you put it into an implementation program. That's where we get the buy-in, council, staff, community, and then we sit there and we work on it. And so my focus right now is learning about the organization, getting the inventories, trying to wrap my head around what are some of the key issues, bringing in somebody to facilitate a workshop where we can come together to put together the framework of a plan, and then we do it. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions from the council. This is just a check-in from me, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Great, thank you. Any questions from the council?
I don't have any. It's pretty clear. Thank you, John.
Yeah, Councilmember Buckley, go ahead.
John, thank you very much for the update. You and I talked earlier today, in fact, about the workshop that we're trying to work towards for the council and you to get together to make sure we're all on the same page as we move forward. I know you're working towards that. Can you, if you mentioned it, I missed it, I apologize. Can you give us an update? What are your timeframes? I know you're getting the understanding of the organization, understanding of, you know, where we sit as a city. What do you think our outlook is for that retreat, workshop, whatever you want to call it, for us all to get together as council and you to, and maybe directors, depending on how you want to handle this, but how we want to move forward as a city?
Yeah, you know, probably if I was going to look at a timeline, somewhere within the next 45 to 60 days, you'll realize that we've got a lot of things that are going on right now. Hopefully we get past the election. We understand where some of this COVID stuff is going, because so many of those things are going to play a role in our ability to set expectations and goals for where we want to go. So, and plus, I'll just be really straight with the council. I mean, you know, we could do it next week, but the reality is that, you know, for me as the city manager here, it would be very disingenuous to think that anybody can get up to speed on where a city's at within a very short time. So the ability for us to, you know, look at it over the course of probably the next 2 months is probably where we're at.
And I want to just thank you for that comment, because I do think it would be a little bit premature for us to try to force this retreat process. I think it's going to be much more beneficial if you get a chance to evaluate the, you know, city and city staff, evaluate the community, evaluate all of us, and figure out kind of how we all work together to kind of move the city forward. And obviously COVID and the pandemic are a huge factor and influence on all of that stuff and how we move our city forward successfully. So thank you, John. Appreciate the update.
Any other questions? Okay.
I was
yeah.
just gonna, I actually had the same question. So thank you, Councilman Spokley, for asking that. And I appreciate your report, John. Thank you very much, and look forward to moving forward in this process and to strategizing on our priorities. So thank you very much.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, John. I agree with what was said because, as you know, on my short list of things when you started, this was on it. So I'm appreciative of us getting this soon to be accomplished. So moving on to item number 10, City Manager's Report.
You know what, so last Thursday was 1 month on the job. I made it, came back. I just want to tell you my impression of Auburn has just been tremendous. If you look at the power of this community, it really is the endurance capital of the world. It starts at the top. The one thing I've learned about the city council members, extremely hardworking group. My engagement and interaction with each of you has been absolutely tremendous, and the collaboration that the council seeks. I have attended every committee commission meeting that has been held: the Endurance Committee, the Fire Advisory, the Arts Commission, the Economic Development, the Airport, and the I think we've now had 3 or 4 of the economic recovery workshops. It's amazing the participation that I've seen. One of the things I like to describe volunteers and people who show up is that it's a force multiplier. It builds and makes you strong because you've got people that want things. Last week was the Economic Development Commission, and they were like, give us assignments. We need to meet. We need to come together. And they really jumped me on getting some things together. So we're going to be working on that. I find it absolutely awesome and motivating. I've been meeting with the staff, and I will give you my impression is that I'm very impressed with the staff. Very motivated people, good people, and I think the ability to do things is great. And then finally, the business associations. Working with the downtown group, the chamber. This week I'm going to be meeting with the Old Town Business Association. I love it. They are can-do and really do people on various things. So anyway, I can tell you, I'm very fired up, absolutely appreciating everybody, and we're just going to keep at it. So anyway, thank you. That's my report.
Great, thank you. Any questions for the city manager? Okay, let's go for month 2. Moving on then to item number 11, our COVID-19 update. Oh, sorry, John, I'll just turn it over to you.
Okay. All right. No, I kind of mentioned a couple of things. Today I sent an inquiry to Placer County to find out how many of our businesses submitted on the Placer Shares program. So I'll try and get back with that. Last week at the Economic Recovery Workshop, obviously, we pointed out we're now in the red zone. Given, I think the one concern about maybe the state moving the goalposts a little bit on some things, obviously some of the new, criteria are something that we need to look after. But one of the things that we do know is that we are right on the cusp of the next zone. So that gives us, I think, 2 weeks to get into that zone and then 3 weeks after that. So the idea that we might be able to advance. The biggest effort on the staff, and I talked with some of the folks today, is just public education on things. One of the things that we know is that just the allowance of people being able to go into the restaurants had a big factor last week. On Friday, I went and I walked through all the businesses in downtown, every single one of them. And this was about 1:30 in the afternoon. Every single one of them had every table that they had indoors filled. And that, if you're going to look at a barometer, there are people that are concerned about the smoke, but even more so, when allowed to go eat inside, they do that. There were people eating outside too. But overall, I think we're just going to keep on our community education with everybody. I know this week we're going to be working on giving out more PPE to everybody. Real nice shout out to Amy, to Jackie with the chamber. They're working really hard in these areas, and overall, really appreciate it. So, COVID-19 update.
Great, thank you. Any questions from the city council? Okay, I don't have anything to add to that. We will not be having our economic recovery workshop. Our next one is not this week, but the following week. So just for everybody's planning and calendar purposes, we met last Friday, and we will meet 2 weeks from that point. And John, thank you. And I made a number of comments at the beginning of the meeting related to some of the COVID items of what we're doing. So hopefully people caught that. So with that, I'll move to item number 12, our city council reports. And just for the sake of it being late, I'm going to ask the council just if there are any critical items that are important to report on. And I'm going to go in order of just how I wrote it down here on my notes. So Councilwoman Mackey, we'll start with you.
You know, I'm going to forego until next meeting. Thank you.
Okay, Council Member Spokley.
Ditto.
Okay, Councilwoman Downing Calvillo.
Just want to let the council know with the Arts Commission that they're projecting that the umbrellas in Central Square should be installed by in October. So I know folks have been waiting for that. And
Awesome.
wait for the rest.
Okay, sounds good. We'll circle back at our next meeting because it is late. And we all have a morning meeting tomorrow at Medler's early in the morning. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and adjourn the meeting, and I'll see many of you tomorrow at Medler's. Good night, everybody.
Good night.